Most people were not trained to build wealth. They were trained to earn. That sounds almost the same. It is not. Earning is when money enters your life. Building is when money stays, moves, protects, compounds, buys time, creates options, and slowly changes your position. Most people know how to earn, or at least they know how to trade their time, energy, attention, and obedience for income. They know how to show up, how to work, how to meet deadlines, how to pay bills, how to keep going. But they were never seriously taught what happens after the money arrives, so the paycheck comes in. For a moment, it feels like progress. Then the money begins to move. Rent, mortgage, food, transport, utilities, debt, subscriptions, insurance, childcare, family obligations, repairs, a little relief, a little comfort, a little reward for being tired. And suddenly, the paycheck is no longer a paycheck. It is a pipeline. It enters your account already assigned to someone else. That is the first uncomfortable truth. Many people do not own their income. They temporarily pass it through their life. They receive it. They distribute it. They survive from it. But they do not truly direct it. And if you do not direct money, money still moves. It just moves according to someone else's design. A bank's design, a landlord's design, a company's design, a platform's design, a retailer's design, a subscription model's design, a lender's design, a lifestyle's design, a fear's design. And if that sounds too dramatic, look at the average month. Most financial decisions are not made in a moment of calm strategy. They are made under pressure. A bill is due. A price went up. A card balance is waiting. A family member needs help. A car breaks down. A child needs something. A phone dies. A tooth starts hurting. The grocery basket is smaller than it used to be. And the person tells themselves, I just need to get through this month. But that sentence can become a life. Just get through this month. Then the next one. Then the next one. Then the next year. Then a decade. And at some point, survival starts to look like personality. People stop saying, I am in a tight financial season. They start saying, I am just bad with money. I am not the kind of person who invests. I do not understand these things. I just work and pay what I can. I will think about the future later. But later is not a place where life waits for you. Later is where the consequences gather. That is why the real financial problem for many people is not laziness. It is not even ignorance in the simple sense. It is mistraining. They were trained to think of money as reward, not as allocation. They were trained to ask, how much do I make? Not, what role does this money play? They were trained to ask, can I afford the payment? Not, what part of my future am I selling? They were trained to ask, what can I buy? Not, what options am I creating or destroying? That difference is everything, because the person who only earns is always waiting for the next inflow. The person who allocates begins to decide what each inflow is supposed to become. Protection, liquidity, debt reduction, skill, asset, time, freedom, repair, joy, or waste. That is the real game. Not just making money, assigning money. Because unassigned money gets recruited fast. It gets recruited by convenience, by anxiety, by advertising, by social pressure, by old habits, by boredom, by debt, by lifestyle creep, by the need to feel like all this work is at least giving you something back. And that last one matters a lot, because people do not only spend because they are careless. They spend because they are tired. They spend because they feel behind. They spend because life has become heavy. They spend because a purchase gives them proof, however temporary, that their effort was not meaningless. A dinner, a new device, a trip, a better car, a brand, a nicer apartment, an upgrade, a small luxury, a visible sign that things are improving. The danger is not pleasure. Pleasure is human. The danger is when pleasure becomes compensation for a life you have not redesigned, because then consumption stops being enjoyment. It becomes pain management. And pain management is expensive when you use money for it every month. That is where many people get trapped. They do not just spend money. They spend money to tolerate the life that earns the money. Then they need more money to keep tolerating that life. That cycle can become very sophisticated. It can wear nice clothes. It can have a good job title. It can drive a decent car. It can use premium apps. It can have airport pictures. It can look successful from the outside. But underneath, it is still dependency. Income comes in. Life absorbs it. Stress rises. Consumption gives relief. Relief fades. The next paycheck becomes necessary. And the person tells themselves they are progressing because the visible life improved. But visibility is not freedom. A higher lifestyle is not the same as a stronger position. That distinction is one of the most important distinctions a person can learn. Lifestyle is what your life costs. Position is what your life can withstand. Lifestyle is visible. Position is often hidden. Lifestyle impresses people. Position protects you when those people are not around. You can raise your lifestyle with debt. You cannot fake a strong position forever. You can finance signals. You cannot finance resilience without eventually paying for it. That is why a person can earn more and become less free. It sounds contradictory, but it happens constantly. The income rises, the apartment improves, the car improves, the restaurants improve, the vacations improve, the phone improves, the clothes improve, the expectations improve, the fixed obligations rise, the monthly pressure rises. The minimum income required to keep the whole identity alive rises, and suddenly the person is earning more than before but cannot move. They cannot pause. They cannot change jobs. They cannot take a lower-paying opportunity that might lead somewhere better. They cannot start over. They cannot say no. They cannot afford honesty. Their life looks upgraded, but their options are smaller. That is not progress. That is a more expensive dependency. And this is where most financial advice becomes too shallow. It says, spend less. Sometimes that is true. It says, save more. Often true. It says, invest early. Useful, if you understand what you are doing. But none of those instructions mean much if the person has not understood the deeper problem. Money is not only math. Money is architecture. It is the structure of your obligations, habits, expectations, fears, buffers, skills, risks, and options. If the architecture is weak, more income can disappear inside it. If the architecture is strong, even moderate income can start doing meaningful work. This is why two people can earn similar money and live in completely different financial realities. One has every future dollar already promised. The other has room. One has a beautiful lifestyle but no buffer. The other has a modest lifestyle and real options. One reacts to every event. The other can absorb shocks. One needs everything to go right. The other can survive something going wrong. That is the difference. And the difference is not always visible. You cannot see the emergency fund. You cannot see the debt that is gone. You cannot see the obligation someone refused. You cannot see the quiet investment. You cannot see the skill being built at night. You cannot see the decision not to impress. But those invisible decisions can shape a life more than the visible ones. Now, before this turns into a simple morality speech, we need to be precise. This is not about blaming every struggling person. That would be stupid and dishonest. Your financial life is not built in a vacuum. The country you live in matters. The cost of housing matters. Wages matter. Inflation matters. Healthcare costs matter. Education matters. Family responsibilities matter. Credit conditions matter. Tax systems matter. Job security matters. The structure around you matters. A person in New York is not making decisions inside the same cost structure as someone in Lisbon. A person in London is not facing the same housing pressure as someone in a smaller British town. A person in Berlin does not live inside the same system as someone in rural America. A person in Madrid, Dublin, Sydney, Manchester, Warsaw, Toronto, or Los Angeles does not face the same combination of wages, rents, taxes, transport, healthcare, and opportunity. So no, everything is not individual choice. But no, everything is not outside your control either. That is the mature position. The system shapes the field. Your decisions shape your position inside the field. Both are true. If you only believe the first, you become passive. If you only believe the second, you become cruel and naive. The useful truth is in the middle. You need to understand the field. And you need to improve your position. That is why official data matters. Not because numbers are more important than life, but because numbers stop the conversation from becoming pure opinion. Inflation, for example, is not just a feeling. The Bureau of Labor Statistics describes the Consumer Price Index as a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by urban consumers for a market basket of goods and services. Eurostat describes the Harmonized Index of Consumer Prices as a measure of inflation comparable across countries, tracking changes in prices paid by households for consumer goods and services. The Bank of England puts the human side very simply. When prices rise quickly, you cannot buy as much with your money and the cost of living is higher. That is not abstract. That is the moment your salary looks the same but feels weaker. That is the moment your grocery list changes. That is the moment a normal month becomes tighter. That is the moment saving sitting still may no longer represent the same power. That is the moment the number in your account lies to you a little. Not because the number is fake, because purchasing power changed. And purchasing power is what matters in real life. You do not eat the number. You eat what the number can buy. You do not live inside the number. You live inside the rent, the mortgage, the heating bill, the fuel cost, the childcare cost, the insurance premium, the train ticket, the medicine, the groceries, the repairs, the taxes, and the obligations that number can cover. So when inflation rises, the question is not only, what is the rate? The real question is, where am I standing while prices move? Because inflation does not hit everyone the same way. If you own assets, your experience may be different. If you can raise prices in your business, your experience may be different. If your income adjusts quickly, your experience may be different. If you have a fixed salary, your experience may be different. If you live paycheck to paycheck, your experience may be brutal. If you have debt, the interest rate environment matters. If you rent, housing markets matter. If you drive long distances, fuel matters. If you have children, childcare and food matter. If you are retired, fixed income matters. A single inflation number enters different lives through different doors. That is why personal finance is personal. Not because principles do not exist. They do, but because position changes consequences. This is also why central banks matter in daily life, even for people who never read a monetary policy statement. The Federal Reserve explains that it influences employment and inflation by using policy tools that affect financial conditions, including the availability and cost of credit in the economy. In plain language, money has a price. Credit has a price. Borrowing conditions change. Mortgages change. Business financing changes. Consumer credit changes. Investment decisions change. The Fed is not sitting at your kitchen table. The European Central Bank is not looking at your rent. The Bank of England is not checking your card statement. The Reserve Bank of Australia is not watching your grocery bill. But the systems they influence can still shape the environment where those decisions happen. The Reserve Bank of Australia, for example, says its inflation target is to keep annual consumer price inflation between 2 and 3% over time. The Bank of England says the government sets it a 2% inflation target to help people and businesses plan for the future. That last word matters. Plan. Stable prices are not just an economist's preference. They help people plan. When prices move too fast, planning becomes harder. When planning becomes harder, households become more defensive. Businesses become more cautious. Debt becomes more stressful. Savings feel less secure. And long-term decisions become harder to make. That is the human meaning of macroeconomics. It is not just charts. It is whether ordinary people can make decisions without feeling that the floor's moving under them. Now, here is the mistake. Many people hear this and conclude, well, if the system is that powerful, what can I do? That question sounds reasonable. But it can become a trap, because the fact that you cannot control the whole system does not mean you should ignore your own position. You cannot control inflation, but you can understand that cash has different roles depending on time horizon. You cannot control interest rates, but you can understand the difference between good liquidity and destructive debt. You cannot control the labor market, but you can work on skills, leverage, negotiation, mobility, and income diversity. You cannot control housing costs everywhere, but you can avoid building a lifestyle that requires perfection every month. You cannot control the culture of consumption, but you can stop letting it write your financial identity. You cannot control every shock, but you can build buffers. The point is not control. The point is resilience. Resilience is a better first goal than wealth, because wealth without resilience can be fragile, and resilience without enormous wealth can still change your life. A resilient person is not invincible. A resilient person can absorb, can pause, can choose, can recover, can say no, can wait, can make decisions without immediate panic. That is already a huge shift, especially in a world where many households are one emergency away from expensive debt. The first level of financial power is not luxury. It is not status. It is not passive income screenshots. It is not a perfect portfolio. The first level is this. Something goes wrong, and you do not collapse immediately. That is power. Quiet power. Unimpressive power. The kind that does not need applause. And for many people, it would change everything. Because without a buffer, every problem becomes urgent. Without liquidity, every unexpected expense becomes a negotiation with fear. Without margin, every bad week becomes a financial threat. Without options, every employer, client, landlord, lender, or family demand has more power over you. That is why margin matters. Margin is not leftover money. Margin is distance from desperation. It is the space between your life and the edge. And if your entire financial life has no margin, then even a small shock can behave like a disaster. A repair, a medical bill, a job delay, a late payment, a rent increase, a rate reset, a family emergency, a month of lower income, a flight you had to take, a boiler that failed, a car that would not start, a dentist appointment you postponed until it became worse. These are ordinary events. But without margin, ordinary events become crises. And when ordinary life keeps becoming crisis, your mind changes. You become more reactive, more anxious, more short-term, more defensive, more likely to take bad credit, more likely to avoid looking at numbers, more likely to chase relief, more likely to accept conditions you should reject. That is not a character flaw. That is pressure. But pressure, if unmanaged, becomes a pattern, and a pattern becomes a life. So before talking about sophisticated investing, before talking about assets, before talking about markets, before talking about wealth, there is a more basic question. How fragile is your life? Not how much do you earn, not how successful do you look. How fragile are you? How many weeks could you go without income? How many bills are already assigned before money arrives? How much of your spending is fixed? How much debt is tied to past decisions? How much of your lifestyle depends on continuous approval from others? How much of your identity requires consumption? How much of your financial plan depends on nothing going wrong? Those questions are not fun, but they are honest. And honest questions are more valuable than motivational lies, because you cannot improve what you are still decorating. You cannot fix fragility while calling it lifestyle. You cannot build freedom while every increase in income becomes a new obligation. You cannot become financially stronger while your future is constantly being spent before it arrives. That is why the calendar may be a more honest financial statement than the bank balance. Look at your calendar. How much of your time is already sold? How much energy is left after work? How much space exists to learn something new? How much flexibility do you actually have? How much of your week belongs to your goals? How much belongs to obligations you created months or years ago? Money and time are not separate. Debt is future income claimed. Work is time converted into money. Inflation is time eroding purchasing power. Investing is time used as an ally. Consumption is present experience purchased with past effort. A skill is future earning capacity being built now. Everything is time wearing a different costume. Once you see that, money becomes harder to waste casually. Not because every dollar, pound, euro, or peso must be worshipped, but because every unit of money contains some part of life, some hour, some risk, some attention, some patience, some exhaustion, some opportunity. So the question is not, can I buy this? The better question is, what part of my life am I exchanging for this, and does the exchange make sense? Sometimes the answer is yes, absolutely. A meaningful trip can make sense. A good meal can make sense. A tool can make sense. A course can make sense. A gift can make sense. A comfortable home can make sense. Rest can make sense. Beauty can make sense. Joy can make sense. This is not about becoming a machine. It is about refusing to be manipulated by your own unexamined impulses. Because not every purchase is joy. Some purchases are fear. Some are loneliness. Some are status anxiety. Some are revenge. Some are boredom. Some are fatigue. Some are an attempt to keep up with people whose balance sheets you will never see. And one of the most expensive things in the world is trying to look stable before you are stable. That sentence matters. Trying to look stable before you are stable can delay actual stability for years, because appearance consumes the resources that could have built the foundation. The upgraded car consumes the buffer. The larger apartment consumes the investment capacity. The constant dining out consumes the debt payment plan. The luxury signals consume the skill budget. The image of success consumes the path to real options. And the person says, at least I am enjoying life. Maybe. Or maybe they are renting proof that they are okay. There is a difference. Enjoyment leaves you fuller. Performance leaves you needing another audience. Enjoyment can exist quietly. Performance needs witnesses. Enjoyment fits inside your structure. Performance often breaks it. That is why the most important question about spending is not whether it looks reasonable from the outside. It is what function it serves inside your life. Does it restore you? Does it connect you? Does it protect you? Does it build you? Does it buy time? Does it reduce future pressure? Does it create a memory worth the cost? Or does it simply keep an identity alive that you cannot afford? That question is uncomfortable. but useful. And useful is better than comforting. Now, if you are listening to this while working, driving, walking, cooking, or trying to sleep, do not turn this into immediate self-hatred. That is not the point. Shame is a bad financial strategy. It burns hot for a few days. Then it collapses. People get ashamed, promise to change everything, cut too hard, become exhausted, rebound, spend again, then feel worse. That cycle is not discipline. It is punishment followed by escape. A better approach is colder. Look at the mechanism. Name it. Design around it. If you spend when anxious, do not just say, "I will stop." Ask, "What will I do the next time anxiety arrives?" If you spend to feel successful, ask, "What would make me feel progress without buying a signal?" If you use credit when stressed, ask, "What buffer would reduce that emergency?" If you upgrade lifestyle every time income rises, ask, "What rule will catch the next increase before lifestyle absorbs it?" If you avoid numbers, ask, "What am I afraid the numbers will reveal?" Because the fear is often worse than the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is just information. The fear is the story you have attached to it. I failed. I am behind. I wasted years. I should know better. I cannot fix this. I am not that kind of person. But those stories are not financial data. They are emotional interpretations. Some may contain truth, but none of them are a plan. A plan starts with facts, not drama. What comes in? What goes out? What is fixed? What is flexible? What is owed? What is the interest rate? What is urgent? What is important? What can be changed now? What requires more income? What requires time? What requires a conversation? What requires education? What requires patience? That is where control begins, not in motivation. Invisibility. Because a hidden financial life becomes more powerful than you. A visible financial life may be painful, but at least it can be worked with. And once you see it, you can separate. That is the next step, separation. Do not let all money live in one mental bucket. Money for monthly life, money for emergency, money for upcoming known expenses, money for debt reduction, money for skill building, money for long-term investing, money for pleasure, money for generosity, money for opportunity. Different functions, different rules, different time horizons, different risk levels. The mistake is treating all money as one pool called what I have, because if everything is one pool, the loudest need wins. And the loudest need is not always the most important one. Urgency is loud. Advertising is loud. Social pressure is loud. Debt is loud. Desire is loud. The future is quiet. Emergency savings are quiet. Long-term investing is quiet. Skill building is quiet. Avoided mistakes are quiet. But quiet does not mean unimportant. Often, the quiet categories are the ones that save your life later. This is where allocation begins. Not with Wall Street. Not with complex portfolios. Not with financial jargon. With giving money a job before the world gives it one. That is allocation. And most people were never trained for it. They were trained to earn, then react. Earn, then pay. Earn, then spend. Earn, then survive. Earn, then wait. Allocation breaks that cycle. It asks, before this money disappears, what must it become? Protection? Debt freedom? Time? Skill? Investment? Joy? Support? Or nothing? And yes, sometimes the honest answer is, this month, most of it must become survival. That is real. There are seasons like that. But even then, the mindset matters. Because if survival takes everything, at least you know the problem is not a small budgeting trick. It may be income. It may be rent. It may be debt. It may be family burden. It may be unstable work. It may be health. It may be a structural issue. And a structural issue requires structural thinking, not just guilt. This is where many financial influencers fail. They give individual tips to structural problems. They say, stop buying coffee, to a person whose rent consumes half their income. They say, just invest, to a person with expensive debt and no emergency fund. They say, start a side hustle, to a person already exhausted by 2 jobs and childcare. They say, change your mindset, to a person dealing with medical costs, unstable work, or a housing market that has moved faster than wages. Those tips may contain pieces of truth, but without diagnosis, they become noise. A good financial strategy does not begin with advice. It begins with position. Where are you? What is the constraint? Is it income? Is it debt? Is it spending? Is it housing? Is it instability? Is it lack of skill? Is it lack of liquidity? Is it emotional spending? Is it family pressure? Is it poor financial literacy? Is it risk ignorance? Is it lifestyle inflation? Different constraints require different moves. If the main problem is expensive debt, the priority is not pretending to be an investor. It may be stopping the bleeding. If the main problem is no buffer, the priority may be liquidity. If the main problem is low income, the priority may be earning power. If the main problem is lifestyle creep, the priority may be containment. If the main problem is fear of all risk, the priority may be education. If the main problem is social comparison, the priority may be identity. If the main problem is chaotic cash flow, the priority may be stabilization. This is why personal finance is not one script. It is diagnosis, then design. And that design must respect reality, not fantasies, not shame, not what worked for someone in a different country, tax system, housing market, or family structure. Reality. Now, one more thing. A lot of people say, I want financial freedom. But what they really mean is, I want the pressure to stop. That is understandable. But financial freedom is not the first step. The first step is financial breathing room, then resilience, then options, then leverage, then freedom, maybe. Trying to jump straight to freedom can make people vulnerable to scams, hype, and unrealistic promises. Because when someone is tired, they do not only want information, they want rescue. And the market is full of people selling rescue. Fast money, secret strategies, passive income with no work, guaranteed returns, easy trading. One asset that will change everything. One system, one course, one shortcut, one escape. And the more desperate you are, the more attractive shortcuts become. That is why resilience matters before ambition. A desperate person is easy to sell to. A person with margin can think. Margin protects your mind, not just your bank account. That may be one of the most important ideas in this entire script. Margin protects the quality of your decisions. Without margin, you decide under threat. With margin, you can evaluate. Without margin, every opportunity looks like a rescue boat. With margin, you can ask if it actually floats. Without margin, fear speaks first. With margin, judgment has a chance. And judgment is what you need, because the modern financial world is not only full of opportunities, it is full of traps that look like opportunities, credit that looks like access, speculation that looks like investing, consumption that looks like self-care, status that looks like progress, busyness that looks like productivity, income that looks like wealth, saving that looks like safety, even when it has no plan, risk avoidance that looks like responsibility, even when inflation is quietly reducing purchasing power. Everything has a disguise. Your job is not to become cynical. Your job is to see through more disguises than before. That is what financial maturity really is. Not knowing every term, not predicting markets, not sounding smart, seeing more clearly, and then acting less foolishly. That may not sound glamorous, but it is powerful. Because in money, avoiding a few large mistakes can matter as much as making a few brilliant moves. Avoiding destructive debt. Avoiding lifestyle inflation. Avoiding panic selling. Avoiding concentration you do not understand. Avoiding scams. Avoiding commitments that remove mobility. Avoiding status spending. Avoiding emotional financial decisions. Avoiding pretending you are stable before you are. Those avoidances are invisible victories. No one claps for them, but they build the floor beneath your life. And without a floor, every ambition becomes dangerous. That is why the order matters. People often want to talk about investing before talking about stability. They want returns before resilience. They want upside before foundation. They want the exciting part before the boring part. But boring is not the enemy. Boring is often what keeps your life from collapsing. Emergency savings are boring. Debt reduction is boring. Insurance is boring. Reading the terms is boring. Waiting before buying is boring. Tracking spending is boring. Learning slowly is boring. Avoiding hype is boring. But boring can be protective. Boring can be what allows you to sleep. Boring can be what keeps one bad month from becoming 6 bad months. Boring can be what lets you say no to a bad job, a bad loan, a bad deal, or a bad opportunity disguised as a rescue. The problem is that boring does not sell well. Nobody goes viral saying, build a buffer, understand your cash flow, do not take debt you cannot explain, avoid lifestyle inflation, increase earning power, and invest according to your horizon and risk tolerance. It is too slow, too responsible, too adult. The internet prefers drama. It prefers the person who turned 1,000 into 1 million. The asset that nobody understands yet. The secret strategy, the urgent warning, the millionaire routine, the luxury signal, the shortcut. But most real financial improvement is not a shortcut. It is a sequence. And if you skip the sequence, the same tool that could help you can hurt you. Investing without liquidity can force you to sell at the wrong time. Credit without discipline can turn income into obligation. A higher salary without allocation can become lifestyle inflation. A side business without cash management can become chaos. A profitable month without reserves can become false confidence. A market win without humility can become overconfidence. A financial tool is only as good as the structure around it. That is why, what should I invest in, is often not the first question. Sometimes the first question is, am I financially stable enough to take risk? Sometimes it is. Do I understand my own cash flow? Sometimes it is. Do I have expensive debt that is already eating my future? Sometimes it is. Do I have money set aside for what can go wrong? Sometimes it is. Do I know when I need this money? Because time horizon changes everything. Money you need next month should not be treated like money you need in 20 years. Money for rent is not money for speculation. Money for emergency is not money for long-term growth. Money for a house deposit is not money for emotional trading. Money for retirement is not money for panic. When you confuse time horizons, you create bad decisions. You put short-term money into long-term risk, or long-term money into short-term fear. Both can damage you. This is why allocation is more than choosing assets. It is matching money to purpose. Purpose determines time. Time determines risk. Risk determines instrument. Instrument determines behavior required. And behavior determines whether you can actually stay with the plan. That last part is where many people fail. Not knowledge, behavior. A person may know that markets move, but panic when they move. A person may know that debt is expensive, but use it again when stressed. A person may know that lifestyle inflation is dangerous, but upgrade anyway when income rises. A person may know that saving matters, but raid savings every time a desire becomes loud. A person may know that investing is long-term, but check the account every hour and emotionally collapse. Financial knowledge that does not survive emotion is not yet financial maturity. It is information. Maturity is when information becomes behavior under pressure, and pressure will come. The market will fall. Prices will rise. Your income may change. A family situation may demand money. A job may become unstable. A product will tempt you. A friend will invite you. A lender will approve you. A platform will sell you a life. Your own mind will say, just this once. So the plan must assume pressure, not deny it. A strong financial life is not built for your most motivated day. It is built for your tired day, your insecure day, your bored day, your lonely day, your overconfident day, your frightened day, the day you want proof that you are doing well, the day you want relief more than progress. That is why rules matter. Not because you are weak, because you are human. A rule might be, I do not finance status. I do not invest money needed within a short period. I do not upgrade fixed expenses immediately after income rises. I do not carry high-interest consumer debt as if it were normal. I do not buy expensive things the same day I want them. I do not invest in anything I cannot explain in plain language. I do not use lifestyle to treat insecurity. I do not confuse credit limit with wealth. I do not let one good month define my spending. I do not let one bad market day define my strategy. These rules are not prison. They are rails. They keep your worst moments from making permanent decisions, because one impulsive decision can create years of consequences. One loan, one car, one lease, one business commitment, one speculative bet, one lifestyle upgrade, one ignored interest rate, one decision made because you wanted to look like the person you hoped to become. That is how people get trapped. Not always through disaster, often through agreements, small signatures, small monthly payments, small upgrades, small compromises, small justifications, until the future has been divided into installments. This is why debt deserves respect, not fear. Respect. Debt is not automatically evil. A mortgage can help someone acquire a home if the numbers are sustainable. A student loan can sometimes increase earning power if the education truly changes income prospects and the debt is manageable. Business credit can support growth if the business has real cash flow and risk controls. Credit can bridge timing gaps. Credit can solve emergencies. Credit can build history. But debt used without understanding is one of the fastest ways to lose freedom while feeling like you gained access. Because debt has a psychological trick. It makes the unaffordable feel available. It turns no into not yet, but maybe monthly. It lowers the emotional barrier. It hides the full cost behind a payment. It lets the present win an argument against the future. And the future is often too quiet to defend itself. So you must defend it in advance. That is what a financially mature person does. They speak for their future self before the future arrives. They ask, will my future self thank me for this? Or will my future self be forced to pay for a moment I barely remember? That question can save you, because many debts are not attached to memories meaningful enough to justify them. They are attached to moods. A mood passed. The payment remained. A stressful week passed. The balance remained. A desire passed. The installment remained. A social moment passed. The obligation remained. That is a terrible trade, and yet it happens constantly. Now, debt also interacts with the larger economy. When interest rates rise, borrowing can become more expensive. Mortgages can reset. Credit card balances can become heavier. Business loans can tighten. Housing affordability can change. Consumer behavior can shift. Central banks influence this environment, even if indirectly, through monetary policy. But the household still has to live inside the result. That is why official explanations matter, but only if translated into daily life. When a central bank raises rates, the news may sound distant. But the practical question is, what happens to my debt? What happens to my mortgage? What happens to my savings rate? What happens to business investment? What happens to jobs? What happens to the cost of borrowing? What happens to the price of waiting? Macroeconomics enters the home through monthly payments. That is the bridge most people were never taught to see. They hear inflation. They hear interest rates. They hear GDP. They hear labor market. They hear central bank. And it sounds like a different world. But it is not a different world. It is the background pressure behind the choices they make every day. The price of groceries, the rent increase, the mortgage quote, the credit card rate, the job opening, the salary negotiation, the cost of a car loan, the return on savings, the valuation of investments, the affordability of starting a business, all connected. You do not need to become an economist, but you do need to stop pretending the economy is separate from your life. It is not. The economy is not just something that happens on television. It is the water your financial life swims in. And if the water changes, your strategy must notice. Now, this is where another mistake appears. Some people use economic complexity as a reason to give up. They say, it is all rigged. It is impossible. Normal people cannot win. The system is designed against us. There is frustration behind that. Some of it is understandable. Housing has become unaffordable in many places. Wages have not kept pace with costs for many workers. Asset owners have often benefited differently from people who only depend on wages. Education, healthcare, childcare, and housing can put enormous pressure on households depending on the country. Those are real issues. But if the conclusion is, so I will do nothing, then the system does not even have to beat you. You have removed yourself. That is not rebellion. That is surrender with better language. The alternative is not naive optimism. It is strategic realism. Strategic realism says, I do not control the whole system, but I can learn how the system affects me. I can reduce fragility. I can build earning power. I can avoid obvious traps. I can use official information instead of rumors. I can understand debt. I can build liquidity. I can invest according to my horizon. I can stop performing a lifestyle that weakens me. I can improve my position, maybe not perfectly, maybe not quickly, maybe not dramatically, but better. Better matters, because the financial gap between two lives is often not one heroic decision. It is hundreds of better decisions repeated over time. Not perfect decisions, better decisions. A little less bad debt, a little more margin, a little more skill, a little less status spending, a little more patience, a little less panic, a little more liquidity, a little less financial denial, a little more income diversity, a little more understanding. Those small changes can compound, not only financially, psychologically. A person with a small emergency fund behaves differently from a person with none. A person with lower debt behaves differently from a person drowning in payments. A person with a useful skill behaves differently from a person with no market leverage. A person with investment knowledge behaves differently from a person who thinks every market decline means disaster. A person with less need to impress behaves differently from a person constantly performing. Financial position changes behavior, and behavior changes outcomes. That is why the first meaningful goal is not to become rich. It is to stop being so easy to pressure. Easy to pressure by bills, by lenders, by employers, by social expectations, by advertising, by your own insecurity, by every unexpected event. A person with no margin is easy to pressure. A person with margin becomes harder to control. That is not a motivational line. It is practical. If you have 6 months of essential expenses, you negotiate differently than if you have 6 days. If you have no high-interest debt, you choose differently than if your past is collecting payments every month. If you have skills that are valuable in the market, you tolerate less nonsense than if you feel replaceable. If you have lower fixed expenses, you can move differently than if your lifestyle requires a high income just to stay alive. If you invest with patience, you think differently than if every dollar must be spent or defended. Money changes your posture, not your worth. Your posture. That is a useful distinction. You are not worth more as a human being because you have more money. But you may have more room to act, more room to refuse, more room to recover, more room to wait, more room to choose. That room matters, and it is worth building. Now, let us talk about income. Because some people turn financial discipline into a religion and forget the obvious. You cannot budget your way out of every income problem. At some level, the issue is not that you spend too much. The issue is that the income is too low for the cost structure of your life. That is especially true in expensive cities. It is true for workers in low-wage sectors. It is true for families with dependents. It is true for people facing healthcare costs. It is true for renters in overheated housing markets. It is true for young adults entering economies where assets rose faster than wages. So yes, spending matters, but earning power matters too. A serious financial strategy has two sides: defense and expansion. Defense means reducing fragility. Emergency fund, debt control, lower fixed obligations, better spending decisions, clearer boundaries, avoiding scams, understanding risk. Expansion means increasing capacity, skills, credentials, negotiation, location, networks, technology, entrepreneurship, sales ability, language ability, career mobility, ownership, assets, business systems. A person who only defends may become stable but stuck. A person who only expands may grow but remain fragile. You need both. Defense keeps you from falling. Expansion keeps you from staying small. But expansion must be honest. Earn more is not a plan, it is a direction. The real question is, what increases your market value? What problems can you solve that people or companies pay more for? What skill is scarce? What industry is growing? What credential actually matters? What network can you access? What can be sold? What can be improved? What can be systematized? What can be learned? What can be negotiated? Where is the gap between what you do and what the market rewards? That last question can be painful, because effort and market value are not the same. A person can work extremely hard and still be underpaid. A person can be exhausted and still not be building a scarce skill. A person can be disciplined and still be in a low-mobility environment. A person can be loyal and still not be rewarded. The market does not automatically pay suffering. It pays perceived value, scarcity, leverage, access, risk, specialization, and demand. That may feel unfair. Often, it is unfair. But refusing to understand it does not make it disappear. If you want higher income, you must eventually confront value creation and value capture. Creating value means solving something useful. Capturing value means being positioned to get paid for it. Many people create value, but capture little. They work hard, they help, they produce, they solve, but the system around them captures most of the upside. Employer, platform, client, institution, intermediary. That is not always exploitation. Sometimes it is simply structure. But if you never ask how value is captured, you may spend your life creating more than you keep. That is a profound financial question. Not, how do I work harder? But, how do I capture more of the value I help create? The answer may be negotiation, specialization, changing employer, changing country, building a business, building an audience, building intellectual property, improving credentials, moving closer to revenue, learning sales, using technology, reducing intermediaries, owning assets, or combining several of these over time. There is no universal answer, but the question matters, because working harder inside the wrong structure can simply make you a more exhausted participant in someone else's wealth-building machine. That does not mean quit tomorrow. It means understand the role you occupy. Employee, contractor, owner, investor, creator, operator, specialist, general labor, manager, salesperson, platform worker. Each role has different upside, risk, stability, and leverage. Many people want owner-level freedom while making employee-level decisions and consumer-level allocations. That does not align. If all your income comes from labor, all your spending goes to consumption, and none of your money buys assets, skills, systems, or leverage, then your financial life has one engine. You, your time, your energy, your body, your attention, and one engine can fail. That is why income diversity matters, not as a buzzword, as resilience. It does not mean everyone needs 5 businesses. That is nonsense for many people. But over time, depending on one income valve is fragile. A second skill, a small side income, a professional network, a transferable credential, a modest investment habit, a business experiment, a portfolio, a rental arrangement, a digital product, a consulting ability, a savings buffer. Different people will choose different paths, but the principle is the same. Reduce total dependency on a single point of failure. A fragile system fails when one part breaks. A stronger system has redundancy. Financial life is no different. If one paycheck is the whole system, the system is fragile. If one employer controls the whole system, it is fragile. If one client controls the whole system, it is fragile. If one asset is the whole investment plan, it is fragile. If one person supports the whole household with no backup, it is fragile. If one emergency can force high-interest debt, it is fragile. This is not pessimism. It is engineering. You do not build a bridge assuming nothing will stress it. You build it expecting stress. Why would you build a life assuming nothing will happen? Something will happen. The question is whether your structure can take it. Now let us move to another uncomfortable area: lifestyle inflation. This is one of the most subtle destroyers of financial progress because it feels like success. You earn more. You upgrade. You deserve it. Your surroundings change. Your expectations change. Your social circle may change. What used to feel expensive starts to feel normal. What used to feel like a treat becomes baseline. Then the next level calls. This is how income growth gets swallowed, not by one stupid decision, by normalization. The first upgrade feels special. The second feels deserved. The third feels natural. The fourth feels necessary. And soon, the old life becomes emotionally unavailable. You cannot go back without feeling diminished. That is the trap. Lifestyle inflation is not only financial. It is psychological. Once your identity attaches to a level of consumption, reducing it feels like losing status, even if the reduction would increase freedom. So people keep carrying heavy lifestyles because the alternative feels like public failure. This is especially dangerous in professional environments where status signals are normalized. The car, the watch, the neighborhood, the vacations, the restaurants, the private school, the aesthetic, the conferences, the lifestyle of competence, the appearance of being established. People can become financially fragile trying to look financially successful. And the irony is brutal. The performance of success delays the construction of it. That is why one of the strongest financial skills is the ability to look less successful than you could, at least for a season. To let income rise without letting lifestyle rise at the same speed. To capture the gap. That gap is where wealth begins. Income minus lifestyle, not income alone. The gap is what funds emergency savings. The gap pays down debt. The gap buys assets. The gap buys skills. The gap buys time. The gap buys opportunity. The gap buys freedom. If income rises and the gap does not, financial position may not improve much. You just have a more expensive life. This is why the first rule after an income increase should be, assign the increase before lifestyle absorbs it. Not all of it. You can enjoy some. Enjoyment matters, but assign part of it before your brain calls it normal. Because the human brain adapts quickly. Give it a higher income with no rule, and it will build a higher baseline. A nicer grocery routine, a better apartment, more delivery, more subscriptions, more travel, more convenience, more everything. Then the increase disappears into normality. And you are back to pressure. That is why many high earners are not wealthy. They are high-throughput financial systems. Money comes in, money goes out, the numbers are larger. The dependency remains. That phrase is important. High income does not automatically mean wealth. High income is potential. Wealth requires retention, allocation, ownership, and time. Without those, high income can become high consumption. And high consumption can become high fragility, especially if it is financed. So the question is never only, how much do you make? The better question is, how much of what you make becomes something that improves your position? Not just your comfort, your position. Does it become liquidity? Does it become lower debt? Does it become ownership? Does it become skill? Does it become health? Does it become time? Does it become freedom? Or does it become proof for others? This is where many people must be brutally honest. A lot of spending is not about comfort. It is about signaling. It says, I am doing well. I belong here. I have taste. I am not behind. I am not poor. I am desirable. I am successful. I am not the person I used to be. Signals are powerful because humans are social. We want recognition. We want dignity. We want to be seen. That is not shameful. But when signals become too expensive, they become chains. Because the audience does not pay the bill. The audience sees the image. You live with the obligation. That is the part nobody posts. People post the trip, not the balance. They post the car, not the payment. They post the apartment, not the pressure. They post the dinner, not the anxiety. They post the lifestyle, not the dependency underneath it. And if you compare your financial reality to someone else's financial performance, you will almost always feel behind. Because you are comparing your full life to their selected evidence. You see one frame. They live with the whole movie. And sometimes the movie is not as impressive as the frame. This is why attention is part of personal finance, not a side topic. A central one. Your attention is where desire begins. Before you spend money, you often spend attention. You watch, you compare, you imagine, you feel smaller, you justify, you buy. That sequence can happen so quickly that it feels like choice, but it was shaped before the transaction. Advertising understands this. Social media understands this. Retail platforms understand this. Credit companies understand this. The modern economy does not wait for you to decide what you value. It constantly suggests what you should value. Convenience, speed, status, beauty, upgrade, belonging, ease, identity, relief, urgency, limited time, low monthly payment. Everyone has it. You deserve it. Do not miss out. That language is not accidental. It is designed to shorten the distance between desire and payment. And the less friction there is, the easier it becomes to spend before your better judgment arrives. One click, one tap, buy now. Pay later, approved, delivered tomorrow. The modern economy is very good at making future consequences feel small at the moment of purchase. That is why friction can be useful. Waiting before buying is not old-fashioned. It is a defense. Removing stored cards can be a defense. Separating accounts can be a defense. Setting limits can be a defense. Not browsing when you are tired can be a defense. Unfollowing status triggers can be a defense. Not because you are weak, because the environment is engineered. A smart person does not walk into an engineered environment and pretend willpower alone is enough. A smart person designs counter-engineering. This matters even more because financial pressure and emotional pressure often arrive together. You do not overspend only on good days. Often, you overspend on difficult ones. After a bad week, after feeling ignored, after a breakup, after a humiliating meeting, after seeing someone else move ahead, after feeling trapped, after realizing your life is not where you thought it would be. Money becomes a quick way to create motion when life feels stuck. And that is why the question, "Can I afford this?" is too weak. A better question is, what emotion is asking me to buy this? If the answer is peace, maybe it is valid. If the answer is joy, maybe. If the answer is repair, maybe. If the answer is shame, comparison, anger, loneliness, or the need to perform, be careful. Because those emotions do not get satisfied by purchases. They rent silence, then they return. And when they return, they often ask for more. That is how emotional spending becomes recurring spending. Not because people are stupid, because the emotional wound was never addressed. It was financed. There is a difference. Now, this does not mean every purchase must be analyzed to death. That would be a miserable way to live. The goal is not obsessive control. The goal is pattern recognition. A single purchase is not the story. The pattern is, if you spend a little when tired, once, that is life. If every stressful week creates a financial leak, that is a pattern. If you upgrade once because it genuinely improves your life, fine. If every insecurity becomes an upgrade, that is a pattern. If you help family once in a crisis, human. If your future is permanently sacrificed because nobody else creates boundaries, pattern. If you use credit once for an emergency, understandable. If credit becomes your monthly bridge between lifestyle and income, pattern. Patterns are more honest than intentions. Intentions say, I want to be free. Patterns say, I am building dependency. Intentions say, I want to invest. Patterns say, I spend every surplus before it has a job. Intentions say, I want peace. Patterns say, I am increasing fixed obligations. Intentions say, I want options. Patterns say, I keep choosing signals. If you want to know your financial direction, study your patterns, not your dreams. Dreams are cheap. Patterns are evidence. And this is where the calendar becomes important again, because the calendar reveals what your money cannot. Your calendar shows whether you have time to think. It's time to learn, time to rest, time to build, time to earn outside your main income, time to maintain your health, time to plan. If your entire calendar is consumed by earning, recovering from earning, commuting, coping, and reacting, then your financial strategy cannot simply be, do more. You may not need more hustle. You may need better leverage. Leverage means producing more value without simply adding more hours. That can come from skills, technology, systems, ownership, negotiation, specialization, distribution, reputation, capital, a better market, a better role, a better business model. For some people, leverage means learning a high-value skill. For others, it means moving closer to revenue. For others, it means building a small service business. For others, it means learning to sell. For others, it means investing consistently. For others, it means using technology to multiply output. For others, it means changing location. For others, it means reducing fixed costs so they can take a smarter risk. But the principle is the same. If your only path to more money is more hours, your body is the ceiling. And the body has limits. You can push for a while. You can do extra shifts, extra projects, extra clients, extra weekends, extra nights. But eventually fatigue collects, and fatigue charges interest. It shows up in health, in relationships, in decision quality, in patience, in creativity, in emotional spending, in burnout. So the question cannot only be, how do I work more? It must become, how do I increase the value of my work? And eventually, how do I make part of my money work beyond my direct labor? That is the movement from earning to allocation, from labor only to structure, from immediate income to durable position. Now, for many people, that transition is slow, very slow, and that is okay. A slow transition is still a transition. A person who saves 1 month of expenses is different from a person with none. A person who pays off one high-interest debt is different from a person still trapped by it. A person who learns one valuable skill is different from a person only repeating old capacity. A person who invests a small amount with understanding is different from a person who sees investing as a casino or a mystery. A person who lowers one fixed obligation is different from a person raising every monthly requirement. Small changes are not small when they change direction, but modern culture hates slow direction. It wants visible transformation. Before and after, big wins, dramatic stories, quitting the job, 6-figure months, luxury lifestyle, passive income overnight. But real financial strength often looks unimpressive while it is being built. It looks like not buying, not upgrading, not reacting, not financing, not showing off, not panicking, not touching the emergency fund, not making a move you do not understand, not accepting every invitation, not letting a raise disappear. There is no applause for restraint, but restraint can be the hinge of your life, because every yes has a future, and every no protects one. This does not mean you should say no to everything. That would be fear, not strategy. It means you should know what your yes is costing. A yes to one lifestyle can be a no to mobility. A yes to one loan can be a no to future options. A yes to constant convenience can be a no to investing. A yes to status can be a no to peace. A yes to helping without limits can be a no to your own stability. A yes to avoiding your numbers can be a no to reality. There is no free yes. Every yes spends something. Money, time, attention, energy, future income, identity, flexibility. The question is whether the exchange is conscious. Now, let us talk about something that is often misunderstood. Saving. Saving is not weak. Saving is not old advice. Saving is not just for people who fear risk. Saving is the foundation of financial breathing room. But saving is not the whole house. Savings can protect you from emergencies. Savings can reduce panic. Savings can let you wait. Savings can stop you from using expensive debt. Savings can make you less fragile. But savings alone may not build long-term wealth if it is never connected to growth, income expansion, or asset ownership. This is especially important in inflationary environments. If money sits for years without a purpose, it may keep its number while losing power. That does not mean cash is bad. Cash has a job. Liquidity is valuable. Emergency money needs to be available. Short-term goals need stability, but long-term money may need a different role. The mistake is not holding cash. The mistake is holding all money with the same purpose. Cash for emergencies is not the same as capital for 20 years. Money for next month's rent is not the same as money for retirement. A short-term safety fund is not the same as a long-term investment plan. So the better question is not, should I save or invest? The better question is, what is this money for and when will I need it? Time horizon first, then risk, then instrument, then behavior. This framework can prevent many mistakes. If the money is needed soon, protect it. If the money is long-term, understand growth and volatility. If the money is for emergencies, do not gamble with it. If the money is for opportunity, keep it accessible enough to act. If the money is for future independence, do not let short-term fear control it. Different money, different jobs. That is allocation. And allocation is the skill most people never learned. They learned income. They learned payment. They learned consumption. They learned debt. They learned maybe saving. But allocation is different. Allocation asks you to think like a small capital manager, even if the amounts are modest. A household is a capital allocation unit. That may sound too formal, but it is true. Every household decides where limited resources go. Housing, food, transport, debt, education, children, health, insurance, investments, entertainment, family support, taxes, savings, time, attention, energy. Those decisions determine fragility or resilience. They determine whether income becomes only survival or also structure. And when a household refuses to allocate consciously, the strongest pressure allocates for it. Debt allocates, rent allocates, advertising allocates, family allocates, convenience allocates, fear allocates, default settings allocate. So the question is not whether allocation happens. It always happens. The question is, who is doing it? You, consciously, or everything else, automatically. This is where we need to speak about investing more carefully. Investing is not magic. Investing is not moral superiority. Investing is not a guarantee. Investing is not a personality badge. Investing is not the same as gambling, but it can become gambling when the person has no framework. At its core, investing means committing capital to something with the expectation of future return, while accepting risk. That risk can be small or large. It can be known or poorly understood. It can be diversified or concentrated. It can be temporary volatility or permanent loss. It can be market risk, credit risk, inflation risk, currency risk, liquidity risk, regulatory risk, business risk, or behavior risk. Behavior risk may be the most ignored, the risk that you will sabotage yourself. You buy because everyone is excited. You sell because everyone is afraid. You put too much in one idea. You invest money you will need soon. You chase a trend you do not understand. You mistake a rising price for proof. You mistake a falling price for death. You confuse volatility with danger and stability with safety. You take advice from people whose incentives you never questioned. That is why investing requires self-knowledge, not just data. What can you tolerate? What do you understand? What is your horizon? What happens if the value drops? What happens if you need cash? What happens if your thesis is wrong? What percentage of your life is exposed to one idea? What would make you sell? What are you actually buying? If you cannot answer these questions, the investment may be less mature than it feels. Now, for long-term investors, productive assets can play an important role. Ownership in businesses, broad market funds, bonds, retirement accounts, real estate in some contexts, cash equivalents for liquidity. Different instruments for different goals, but the key idea is not to worship any single asset. The key idea is to shift part of your life from pure labor dependence toward ownership, protection, and productive exposure. That shift can be modest. It can begin small, but it changes identity. A person who only earns and spends remains a worker-consumer inside the system. A person who saves, invests, builds skills, and reduces fragility becomes something else. Still a worker, maybe. Still a consumer, yes, but also a builder. A capital allocator. A future owner, a person with some claim, however small, on something beyond the next paycheck. That is a psychological shift, and over time, it can become a financial one. But again, order matters. If someone has high-interest debt, no emergency fund. unstable income, and no understanding of risk, aggressive investing may not be strategy. It may be desperation wearing intelligent clothes. Desperation loves sophisticated language. It says, I am taking asymmetric risk. I am early. I see what others do not. This is conviction. Sometimes, maybe, often, it is just hope under pressure. And hope is not a risk management system. Before trying to multiply money, ask whether your financial life can survive loss. If it cannot, the priority may be resilience. This is not exciting, but it is honest. Now, let us bring in official context again, but lightly. Central banks generally do not promise to make people rich. They aim for stability, price stability, employment conditions, financial conditions. The European Central Bank explains that price stability means inflation should be low, stable, and predictable, supporting planning and economic decisions. That word predictable is important. A household also needs predictability. Not perfect certainty. That does not exist, but enough predictability to plan. If your income is unpredictable, you need larger buffers. If your expenses are unpredictable, you need better tracking and reserves. If your debt cost is unpredictable, you need caution. If your industry is unpredictable, you need transferable skills. If your country's inflation is unpredictable, you need to understand purchasing power. If your job is unpredictable, you need redundancy. This is how macro thinking becomes personal strategy. You do not copy the central bank. You learn the value of stability. A country with no stability struggles to plan. A household with no stability struggles too. And just as policymakers care about inflation expectations, households have their own expectations. If you expect life to always be tight, you may stop trying. If you expect every increase in income to disappear, you may spend it before it can disappoint you. If you expect investing to be only for the rich, you may never learn. If you expect debt to be normal, you may never question it. If you expect your lifestyle to rise with every raise, it will. Expectations shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. So part of financial change is changing what you consider normal. It should not feel normal to have every paycheck already claimed. It should not feel normal to carry consumer debt without a plan. It should not feel normal to upgrade fixed expenses automatically. It should not feel normal to avoid your financial reality for months. It should not feel normal to depend on one fragile income source forever. It should not feel normal to know more about products you buy than about the debt, taxes, inflation, and investments affecting your life. But many things become normal because everyone around you lives the same way. Normalization is powerful. If everyone finances cars, it feels normal. If everyone has credit card debt, it feels normal. If everyone upgrades lifestyle with income, it feels normal. If everyone avoids investing, it feels normal. If everyone complains about money but never studies it, it feels normal. If everyone performs success, performance feels like survival. That is why you may need to become socially strange for a while. Not loud, not arrogant, strange. The person who does not upgrade immediately. The person who reads before signing. The person who says no. The person who does not finance status. The person who keeps driving the older car. The person who learns quietly. The person who builds liquidity instead of showing off. The person who lets money become structure before letting it become lifestyle. This may make you less impressive for a while, but it can make you more free later. And that is a trade worth considering, because many people are addicted to looking ahead of where they actually are. They want the life to appear before the foundation exists. But a visible life built before the foundation becomes expensive theater, and theater requires constant maintenance. You have to keep the set standing, keep the lights on, keep the role alive, keep the image consistent. And if your income stumbles, the performance becomes terrifying. A simpler, stronger life may not impress as many people, but it can give you something better. Room to think, room to recover, room to build, room to take a calculated risk, room to live without every month feeling like a test you barely passed. Room is underrated, because room is invisible, but room is where strategy happens. Without room, you only react. With room, you can allocate. And this brings us back to the central thesis. You were trained to earn, but the life you want may require learning to allocate. Allocate money, allocate time, allocate attention, allocate risk, allocate energy, allocate ambition, allocate comfort. Because every life has limited resources. The question is whether those resources are being assigned by intention or by pressure. Most people do not lose financially because they never had any opportunity. Many lose because when opportunity appears, they are not in position. No liquidity, too much debt, too little skill, too much lifestyle, too much fear, too much dependence, too little patience, too little understanding. The opportunity is visible, but it is unusable. That is one of the most painful financial experiences, seeing what could be done but not being positioned to do it. A market decline you cannot use because you have no cash. A job opportunity you cannot take because you cannot handle a temporary pay cut. A business idea you cannot test because every month is already consumed. A move you cannot make because your fixed obligations are too high. A course you cannot take because you are too exhausted and overcommitted. A chance to help someone you love, but you are already stretched. A life change you understand but cannot afford. This is why position must be built before the moment. You do not build a parachute after jumping. You do not build liquidity after the emergency. You do not build skills after the opportunity requires them. You do not build courage after every obligation has made change impossible. You prepare before, quietly, slowly, before anyone notices. That is the unglamorous truth. Financial strength is usually built before it is needed. And when it is needed, it looks like luck to people who did not see the preparation. And when preparation finally matters, it often looks invisible to everyone else. Someone sees you take an opportunity and says, "You were lucky." But they did not see the months you spent reducing debt. They did not see the older car you kept driving. They did not see the trips you skipped. They did not see the nights spent learning. They did not see the money you did not touch. They did not see the temptation you refused. They did not see the quiet discipline that made the moment usable. That is the strange thing about financial preparation. When it works, people often call it luck, and sometimes luck is part of it. Of course it is. Timing matters. Country matters. Family matters. Health matters. Markets matter. Who you meet matters. Being in the right place matters. But luck is more powerful when it finds someone positioned. A good opportunity in the hands of a fragile person can become stress. A good opportunity in the hands of a prepared person can become a turning point. That is why the goal is not to eliminate luck. You cannot. The goal is to become more capable of using it when it appears. And that capability is built in quiet, boring, repeated decisions. Now, let us talk about one of the least glamorous but most powerful forms of financial strength. Lower fixed costs. People love to talk about income. They love to talk about investments. They love to talk about big returns. They do not love to talk about fixed obligations. But fixed obligations decide how trapped you are. Rent, mortgage, car payments, insurance, subscriptions, loan payments, school payments, phone plans, lifestyle commitments, family support that has become permanent, business expenses, minimum monthly requirements. Every fixed obligation is a claim on your future income. Some are necessary, some are useful, some are worth it, some are not. But all of them reduce flexibility, and flexibility is a financial asset. It may not appear on a balance sheet, but you feel it. A person with lower fixed costs can survive income volatility better, can take a lower paying opportunity if it has long-term upside, can move faster, can save more, can invest more, can recover from shocks, can say no. A person with high fixed costs may need a high income just to stay in place. That person may look more successful, but the structure is heavier. This is where people confuse a richer life with a heavier life. They add comfort, but also obligation. They add convenience, but also dependency. They add status, but also pressure. They add monthly payments, but subtract mobility. So before accepting any recurring cost, ask a simple question. Do I want this enough to make my future less flexible? That question changes the purchase, because fixed costs are not just expenses, they are future restrictions. A one-time purchase may hurt once. A fixed obligation follows you. It becomes part of the minimum your life demands. And the higher that minimum is, the more income you need just to remain unchanged. That is why raising your baseline too quickly can be dangerous. Your baseline becomes your cage. A nice cage maybe, a comfortable one, but still a cage if you cannot leave it. Now there is another angle. Sometimes lowering fixed costs can do more for freedom than increasing income. Not always, but sometimes, if you increase income by $500 a month but increase fixed costs by $600, you got weaker. If you lower fixed costs by $500, that is $500 of flexibility every month. It can build a buffer. It can pay debt. It can fund learning. It can support investment. It can buy time. It can reduce fear. This is why the cheapest life is not always the goal. But a lighter life can be strategic. There is a difference between deprivation and design. Deprivation says, I cannot have anything. Design says, I choose not to make everything permanent. That difference matters. A designed life can include comfort, but it does not allow comfort to destroy mobility. It does not turn every good month into a permanent commitment. It does not confuse I can pay this now with this makes me stronger. This is where the phrase I can afford it becomes dangerous. Many people use it too early. They look at the payment and they look at the account. They say, I can afford it. But what they mean is, I can make the payment if everything continues normally. That is not the same as affordability. Real affordability asks more. Can I pay it and still build emergency savings? Can I pay it and still reduce debt? Can I pay it and still invest for the future? Can I pay it and still survive a bad month? Can I pay it and still sleep? Can I pay it and still have options? If the answer is no, then you may be able to pay, but you may not be able to afford. This distinction can change a life. Paymentability is not affordability. Paymentability looks at the present. Affordability respects the future, and the future deserves representation. Because the future cannot speak when you are excited. It cannot speak when the salesperson is smiling. It cannot speak when the checkout page says only monthly. It cannot speak when everyone around you says you deserve it. You must speak for it. That is what maturity does. It protects the future from the mood of the present. Now, we need to talk about ownership, not as ideology, as structure. A person who only earns wages and buys consumption has a certain role in the economy. They provide labor. They consume goods and services. They may save, they may borrow, but they do not own much of the productive side. A person who gradually accumulates ownership has a different role. Ownership can mean many things. Shares of broad businesses, retirement assets, a small company, tools, intellectual property, real estate. When appropriate, a professional practice, a digital product, a client base, a brand, a set of skills that generates income beyond one employer. Ownership is not only stock market exposure. Ownership is having a claim on something that can produce value beyond the immediate sale of your hours. This matters because labor income has limits. You can only work so many hours. You can only recover so much. Your energy is not infinite. Your employability can change. Your health can change. Your industry can change. But ownership, when built intelligently, can create a different relationship with time. Not effortless, not risk-free, but different. A business can operate while you are not actively producing every second. A portfolio can participate in companies while you work elsewhere. A useful tool can increase output. A brand can attract opportunity. A skill can command higher rates. A system can multiply effort. A reputation can reduce friction. These are all forms of leverage, and leverage is how people escape the pure time for money ceiling. But leverage also carries risk. A business can fail. A portfolio can fall. A tool can become obsolete. A brand can lose trust. A skill can become less valuable. A system can break. So again, maturity is not blind optimism. It is allocation with risk awareness. This is why become an owner should not be turned into a slogan. It should be treated as a direction, a gradual shift from only consuming to also building, from only receiving income to also creating assets, from only working inside systems to also owning small pieces of systems. From only buying products to sometimes building products. From only paying interest to sometimes earning interest. From only depending on a paycheck to slowly building other claims. That shift can begin small, very small. A retirement contribution, a broad index fund, a certificate, a paid tool that increases output, a small business experiment, a professional license, a portfolio of work, a savings buffer that lets you negotiate, a book of clients. A digital asset, a better credential, a language skill. The form depends on the person, but the movement is the same. Less pure dependency, more structure. Now, this brings us to another critical point. Not all assets are financial. Some of the most important assets are personal. Your health, your ability to learn, your reputation, your network, your credibility, your emotional regulation, your ability to sell, your ability to communicate, your ability to focus, your ability to make decisions under uncertainty, your ability to recover. These things may not appear as line items, but they affect income, risk, opportunity, and judgment. A person with poor emotional regulation may sabotage investments. A person with poor health may lose earning capacity. A person with poor communication may fail to negotiate. A person with no reputation may struggle to access opportunity. A person with no focus may never finish building a skill. A person with no ability to sell may create value, but fail to capture it. So when we say invest, we should not only think of markets. Sometimes the best investment is not a stock. It is becoming more capable, more employable, more resilient, more clear, more trustworthy, more skilled, more physically stable, more mentally stable, more able to create value. Of course, this can be overused. Some people call every expense an investment. A luxury purchase is not an investment just because it makes you feel confident. A course is not an investment if you never use it. A tool is not an investment if it does not increase capacity. A trip is not an investment just because it sounds better that way. Words matter. Calling something an investment does not make it one. An investment should have a plausible path to increasing value, capacity, resilience, or future options. If not, maybe it is consumption. And consumption is allowed. Just do not mislabel it. Mislabeling destroys clarity. If you buy pleasure, call it pleasure. If you buy status, call it status. If you buy rest, call it rest. If you buy education, make sure it becomes skill. If you buy a tool, make sure it improves output. If you buy an asset, understand the risk. Naming things correctly is a form of power, because vague language protects bad decisions. I needed it. Did you? I deserved it. Maybe. But did it help? It is an investment. In what way? It was on sale. Would you have bought it otherwise? It is only monthly. For how many months? I will make it back. How? It is different this time. Why? Good questions interrupt bad momentum, and sometimes one interrupted decision saves you months. Now let us talk about risk in a more adult way. Many people think risk means losing money. That is one form, but risk is broader. There is risk in investing, but there is also risk in never investing. There is risk in starting a business, but there is also risk in depending forever on one employer. There is risk in changing careers, but there is also risk in staying in a declining field. There is risk in holding cash. There is risk in holding no cash. There is risk in buying a home. There is risk in renting forever. There is risk in debt. There is risk in never using leverage when it could have been useful. The point is not to avoid risk. That is impossible. The point is to understand which risks you are taking, whether you are being compensated, and whether your life can survive if the risk goes badly. This is a more mature question than, is this safe? Nothing is completely safe. Even safe choices have hidden risks. Holding too much cash can create purchasing power risk. Avoiding all career change can create stagnation risk. Never learning about investing can create retirement risk. Keeping all income from one source creates concentration risk. Living in an expensive fixed lifestyle creates liquidity risk. The danger is not only taking risk. The danger is taking risk unconsciously. Unconscious risk feels safe until it breaks. A conscious risk may feel uncomfortable, but it can be managed. That is why education matters. Not to remove uncertainty, to choose uncertainty better. Now, one of the biggest financial risks is concentration. Concentration means too much depends on one thing. One job, one client, one asset, one market, one currency, one skill, one person, one industry, one source of approval. When that one thing is strong, everything feels fine. When it weakens, the whole life shakes. Many people live concentrated without realizing it. Their income is concentrated in one employer. Their savings are concentrated in cash. Their investments are concentrated in one company. Their identity is concentrated in one job title. Their social status is concentrated in one lifestyle. Their emergency plan is concentrated in credit cards. Their family finances are concentrated in one earner. That is fragile. Diversification is not just an investment concept. It is a life concept. Diversify skills, diversify relationships, diversify income potential, diversify knowledge, diversify assets when appropriate. Diversify your sources of meaning so money is not forced to carry all emotional weight. This does not mean scatter your life. It means reduce single points of failure. A life with too many single points of failure is not strong. It is lucky so far. That phrase should stay with you. Fragility often looks like stability until the first shock, and shocks reveal structure. They reveal whether you had buffer, whether your debt was manageable, whether your income was too concentrated, whether your spending was too fixed, whether your confidence was based on reality, whether your plan had room for error. This is why financial planning must include the question, what if I am wrong? What if income drops? What if the investment falls? What if inflation stays higher longer? What if the job changes? What if the tenant leaves? What if the business slows? What if the car breaks? What if health changes? What if the relationship ends? What if the interest rate changes? What if the opportunity takes longer? not to live in fear, to build margin of safety. A plan that only works if everything goes right is not a plan. It is a wish, and a wish is not enough. Now, let us connect this to the international context. In the United States, people often face a system where healthcare costs, student debt, housing, and credit can shape financial decisions intensely. In the United Kingdom, households may feel pressure from housing costs, energy prices, mortgage rates, and cost of living changes. In the European Union, the experience varies across countries, but inflation measurement, wages, energy exposure, and housing markets all shape household finances. In Australia, housing affordability and household debt are major themes in many financial conversations. The specific pressures differ, but the underlying principle is similar. The household has to translate macro conditions into personal resilience. What does inflation mean for my budget? What do interest rates mean for my debt? What does housing cost mean for my mobility? What does my labor market mean for my earning power? What does my country's safety net mean for my emergency planning? What does my currency exposure mean for my investments? What does my tax system mean for my real returns? A serious person does not need to know everything, but they must know enough to ask better questions, because the quality of your financial life often follows the quality of your questions. Bad question. Why is life so expensive? Better question. Which parts of my cost structure are fixed, which are flexible, and which are rising faster than my income? Bad question. How do I get rich? Better question. How do I build resilience, increase earning power, and allocate capital over time? Bad question. Should I buy this? Better question. What future flexibility does this cost me? Bad question. What investment will make the most money? Better question. What risk can I understand, afford, and hold through time? Bad question. Can I make the payment? Better question. Does this obligation make my life stronger or heavier? Bad question. Do I deserve this? Better question. Does this support the life I say I want? These questions are not glamorous, but they are sharp. They cut through noise, and money is full of noise. Markets make noise. Politicians make noise. Influencers make noise. Friends make noise. Family makes noise. Advertising makes noise. Your insecurity makes noise. Your ambition makes noise. Your fear makes noise. If you do not have questions strong enough to cut through noise, you will be moved by whatever is loudest. And whatever is loudest usually wants something from you. Your click, your payment, your vote, your attention, your debt, your loyalty, your envy, your panic, your desire. This is why financial clarity is also psychological self-defense. You are not just protecting money. You are protecting your ability to think. Now, let us talk about family and relationships. Money is rarely individual in practice. Even when the account is individual, the pressure is relational. Partners, children, parents, siblings, friends, community, cultural expectations, care obligations, shared rent, shared debt, shared dreams, shared emergencies. Money enters relationships, whether people admit it or not. And when there is no clear communication, money becomes resentment. One person pays more and says nothing. One person spends more and avoids the conversation. One person saves while the other consumes. One person supports family secretly. One person carries debt silently. One person wants security. The other wants lifestyle. One person fears risk. The other fears missing out. These differences do not stay financial. They become emotional. They become arguments about respect, trust, love, control, fairness, and future. That is why financial maturity includes conversation, not only calculation. Can we afford this? What are we building? What are our obligations? Who depends on us? What debt exists? What are our limits? What happens in an emergency? What kind of life are we trying to create? What do we refuse to finance? What does support mean? What does sacrifice mean? What does fairness mean? Avoiding these conversations can feel peaceful for a while, but silence charges interest too. It becomes resentment, confusion, hidden debt, unspoken expectations, financial betrayal, power imbalance, fear. And then money becomes the visible topic for a deeper problem. This is why boundaries matter. A boundary is not selfishness. A boundary is a structure that prevents generosity from becoming destruction. You can help people and still have limits. You can love family and still say no. You can support a partner and still require transparency. You can be generous and still protect your future. You can care without becoming the emergency fund for every person who refuses to plan. That last line may sound harsh, but it is necessary. Because in many families, one responsible person becomes the informal financial shock absorber for everyone else. They pay, they solve, they rescue, they cover. They say yes. And slowly, their own future gets delayed. At first it feels noble, then it becomes expected, then it becomes invisible, then it becomes resentment. And when they finally set a boundary, everyone acts surprised. But the problem was not the boundary. The problem was years without one. This is part of money too. If you cannot say no, you do not have a budget. You have a list of permissions granted to other people. A budget is not only numbers, it is a border. And a border that cannot be defended is just decoration. Now, this does not mean every person asking for help is irresponsible. Life is hard. People get sick, lose jobs, face emergencies, fall behind, need support. Human beings are not spreadsheets, but support without structure can harm both sides. It can keep one person dependent and the other depleted. Good support needs clarity. Is this a gift? A loan? A one-time emergency? A recurring obligation? What is the limit? What is the plan? What happens next time? Without those questions, money becomes emotional fog. And fog is expensive. Clarity may feel uncomfortable, but it prevents silent damage. This applies to couples too. A relationship without financial honesty is carrying a hidden risk. Not because both people must earn the same. Not because every relationship should be perfectly symmetrical. But because money decisions reveal values, security, freedom, pleasure, status, family, risk, control, trust, future. If two people never discuss those values, they may be building different lives with the same bank account. That will eventually hurt. So yes, financial maturity includes spreadsheets, but it also includes difficult conversations. A person who can analyze an investment but cannot tell their family no is still financially vulnerable. A person who can budget but cannot be honest with a partner is vulnerable. A person who earns well but uses money to avoid conflict is vulnerable. Money is not just numbers. It is behavior under pressure, and relationships create pressure. Now, let us return to the idea of work. Work is usually where the first money comes from. For most people, work is the starting engine. There is nothing wrong with that. Work can be honorable, useful, skill-building, stabilizing. But if work remains the only engine forever, the structure may remain fragile. The question is not, how do I stop working immediately? That question leads to fantasy. The better question is, how do I make my work produce more than survival? Can part of my work income become a buffer? Can part become debt freedom? Can part become skills? Can part become assets? Can part become a business experiment? Can part become reputation? Can part become negotiation power? Can part become time? If the answer is always no, then work is only feeding the present. And if work only feeds the present for too long, the future arrives hungry. This is why some people reach their 40s, 50s, or 60s with a painful realization. They worked for decades. They paid bills. They raised families. They survived. They did many honorable things. But their work did not accumulate into enough options. That is not always their fault, but it is always painful. And the earlier someone understands this, the better. Because time is not only something you spend, it is something your financial decisions either use or waste. Investing uses time. Debt uses time against you. Skill building uses time. Procrastination uses time too. Inflation uses time. Compounding uses time. Avoidance uses time. Everything uses time. The question is whether time is working with you or quietly against you. And for many people, time has been working against them without their noticing. Not because they made one catastrophic decision, but because they made many small decisions with no structure. A little debt, a little lifestyle increase, a little avoidance, a little comparison, a little delay, a little I will start later, a little I deserve this, a little it is only monthly, a little I will figure it out, a little next year. Then one day, years have passed. The job changed, the body changed, prices changed, the economy changed, the market changed, the family changed, but the financial structure did not change enough. That is when people feel betrayed by time. But time was not hiding. It was accumulating everything, the good and the bad. Time accumulates neglect, but it also accumulates intention. That is the hopeful part. The same force that makes small financial leaks dangerous can make small intelligent moves powerful. A small debt payment repeated, a small investment repeated, a small skill session repeated, a small spending boundary repeated, a small savings habit repeated, a small improvement in income repeated, a small refusal to perform repeated, A small increase in clarity repeated. These things can become serious over time, not because they are dramatic, because they are repeated. Repetition is one of the most underrated forces in finance. People look for intensity, but finance often rewards consistency. Not always. Nothing is guaranteed. But consistency gives probability something to work with. A person who understands this stops needing every month to feel revolutionary. They start asking, did I move the structure in the right direction? Even slightly? Less debt, more margin, more skill, more understanding, more liquidity, better allocation, fewer unnecessary obligations, less emotional spending, more ownership, more patience. If yes, the month mattered, even if nobody noticed. This is important because visible progress is often delayed. When you pay down debt, the world does not applaud. When you build an emergency fund, nothing flashy happens. When you invest modestly for the long term, it may feel almost irrelevant at first. When you learn a skill, the payoff may not arrive immediately. When you keep your lifestyle stable after a raise, other people may not even understand what you are doing. But the structure is changing, quietly. And quiet change is still change. Now, we need to discuss a dangerous idea. I am too late. Many adults feel this. They look at their age, their debt, their savings, their career, their missed opportunities, their friends, their parents, their younger people investing earlier, their own past decisions, and they think, it is too late. This belief can feel realistic, but it is often just despair pretending to be analysis. Being late is not the same as being finished. Yes, starting earlier helps. Yes, compounding favors time. Yes, some opportunities pass. Yes, some mistakes are expensive. Pretending otherwise would be childish. But the question is not, would my life be better if I had started earlier? Probably. The question is, what is the best move from here? That question is adult. It does not deny the past, but it refuses to worship it. From here, that phrase matters, because every financial life begins again from here. Not from the age you wish you had, not from the income you wish you had, not from the family you wish you had, not from the economy you wish existed. From here, with the debt that exists, the skills that exist, the time that remains, the income that can be improved, the habits that can be changed, the mistakes that can be learned from, the obligations that can be renegotiated, the assets that can be built, the reality that is actually in front of you. A person who starts from here has power. A person who lives in I should have loses power. Regret can teach, but if regret becomes identity, it becomes another debt, an emotional debt. You keep paying the past with attention that should be building the future. So yes, regret what needs to be regretted. Learn. Then stop financing the same mistake with your mind. Now, there is another trap. The fantasy of one move. The one investment. The one business. The one viral idea. The one career jump. The one trade. The one property. The one opportunity. The one decision that changes everything. Sometimes one move does change a life. It happens. But it is dangerous to build your entire financial psychology around it. Because waiting for one move can make you neglect the 100 moves that are actually available. While waiting for the big investment, you ignore debt. While waiting for the perfect business, you avoid skill. While waiting for the market crash, you never build cash. While waiting for the breakthrough, you keep spending. While waiting for a miracle, you never build a system. One big move is attractive because it protects the ego. It says, I do not need to become disciplined. I just need the right opportunity. But often, the right opportunity only works for someone who already built discipline. That is the paradox. The moment looks sudden. The preparation was not. So stop asking only, what is the move? Ask, what kind of person and structure would be able to use the move if it came? That question is better, because it brings you back to preparation, liquidity, skill, judgment, network, risk tolerance, low fixed costs, information, emotional control, time. If those are missing, the opportunity may be too heavy for your current structure. And a heavy opportunity can crush an unprepared person. Now, let us talk about the myth of passive income. The phrase is seductive. Passive income. Money while you sleep. Freedom. No boss, no schedule, no trade of time for money. It sounds beautiful, and some forms of income can become more passive over time. Investments can pay dividends or interest. A business can be systematized. A rental property can generate income. Digital products can sell repeatedly. Royalties can exist, but the word passive hides the work, risk, capital, maintenance, and time that usually came before. Many so-called passive income streams are active at the beginning. Active in creation, active in capital, active in risk, active in management, active in maintenance, active in learning, active in mistakes. So when someone sells passive income as an easy escape, be careful. They may be selling the dream, not the structure. A better phrase is not passive income. A better phrase is less directly time-dependent income. Income that does not require the same direct hour for dollar exchange every time. That is a real goal, but it usually requires building something. Capital, systems, assets, audience, processes, products, knowledge, ownership. And building takes effort. The goal is not to avoid effort. The goal is to make effort accumulate. That is the key. In a weak financial structure, effort disappears. In a strong structure, effort leaves residue. Skills, assets, equity, trust, systems, audience, reputation, capital, knowledge. Every year should leave something behind. Not only memories and receipts, something that improves your position. If a year of work leaves no buffer, no skill, no lower debt, no better income, no ownership, no learning, no stronger network, and no clearer direction, then ask carefully, where did the year go? Not with shame, with seriousness. Because years are expensive. You pay for them with life. And life is the one currency you cannot earn back. This is why time must become central in financial thinking. Money lost can sometimes be recovered. Time converted into nothing cannot. That does not mean every moment must be productive. Rest matters, love matters, beauty matters, health matters, family matters, joy matters. But unconscious waste is different from rest. Rest restores, waste numbs, joy enriches, performance exhausts. A meaningful experience gives something back. A compulsive purchase often asks for another. The distinction is not always obvious, but you can feel it if you are honest. After some spending, you feel nourished. After other spending, you feel hollow. That hollowness is information. Do not ignore it. It tells you that money was used to treat something it could not cure. This is especially true with status spending. Status spending rarely ends because status is comparative. If your goal is to feel ahead, there will always be someone ahead. Someone with more money, a better house, a better body, a better career, a better vacation, a better portfolio, a better story, a better image. If your financial identity depends on ranking, peace becomes impossible. The ranking never ends. So one of the most financially intelligent moves is to leave some games. Not lose them, leave them. The game of impressing people who do not matter. The game of upgrading faster than your foundation. The game of proving you are not behind. The game of using lifestyle to heal insecurity. The game of making every increase visible. The game of confusing attention with value. Leaving those games can feel like loss at first, but it frees capital, not only money, attention, energy, time, desire. The less you need to perform, the more you can allocate. And allocation is where your future is built. Now, let us discuss career risk. A lot of people think a stable job is the opposite of risk. Sometimes it is, but sometimes a job can feel stable while your position is quietly weakening. Your industry may be changing. Technology may be moving. Your skills may be aging. Your wage may not be keeping up with costs. Your role may be too narrow. Your professional network may be thin. Your entire income may depend on one employer's decision. That is risk. It may not show up daily, but it exists. A career is an asset. It can appreciate or depreciate. If you learn, adapt, build reputation, understand market needs, and stay relevant, your earning power may rise. If you repeat the same capacity while the market changes, your earning power may stagnate or fall. This is not fair. It is reality, and reality does not ask for permission before changing. Technology is especially important here. Automation, artificial intelligence, digital platforms, remote work, data tools, software, global competition. All of these can change what the market rewards. Some people will use tools to increase output. Others will be replaced by people who use tools. That is uncomfortable, but ignoring it is more dangerous. A serious financial plan includes skill renewal. Not because everyone must become a programmer. Not because every person needs to chase trends, but because employability is part of financial resilience. If your income is your main asset, then maintaining and improving your ability to earn is not optional. It is asset management. You are the asset. Your skill is the asset. Your credibility is the asset. Your health is the asset. Your attention is the asset. And if you neglect all of that while focusing only on cutting expenses, the strategy is incomplete. This is why education can be an investment, but only when connected to execution. Reading without application becomes entertainment. Courses without practice become decoration. Certificates without market relevance become paper. Learning must eventually become capability. Capability must eventually become value. Value must eventually be captured. That chain matters. Learn, apply, solve, communicate, negotiate, capture. Many people stop at learn, then wonder why income does not change. The market does not pay you for what you consumed. It pays you for what you can use to solve problems. That is why skill building must be targeted. What problem does this skill solve? Who pays for that problem to be solved? How do they evaluate competence? How can I prove it? How can I access them? How can I increase trust? How can I move closer to the money? These questions sound practical because they are, and practical is what changes income. Now, let us connect income to dignity. Some people feel ashamed wanting more money. They think it makes them materialistic. But wanting more money for more options is not shallow. Wanting money to stop being constantly afraid is not shallow. Wanting money to protect family is not shallow. Wanting money to leave a bad environment is not shallow. Wanting money to buy time for health, learning, rest, or creation is not shallow. The shallow version is wanting money only to perform superiority. The serious version is wanting money to increase agency. Agency is the ability to act, to choose, to refuse, to build, to recover, to protect, to pursue. That is a noble reason to care about money, not worship it. Care about it. There is a difference. A person who worships money may sacrifice everything human to get it. A person who understands money uses it to protect what is human. That is the frame. Money should serve life. But if you refuse to understand it, life often ends up serving money. That is the paradox. People who say money does not matter often think about money constantly when they do not have enough. Bills, prices, debt, rent, groceries, emergencies, work, stress. They may not love money, but money still occupies their mind. Understanding money does not guarantee peace, but ignorance almost guarantees unnecessary dependence. Now let us move into a more strategic framework. Imagine your financial life as 4 layers. Layer 1, survival. Money comes in and covers basic needs: food, housing, transport, health, utilities, minimum obligations. This layer must exist. There is no shame in it. Layer 2, stability. Emergency savings, lower bad debt, predictable cash flow, basic insurance where appropriate, reduced chaos. This layer gives breathing room. Layer 3, mobility, skills, income growth, lower fixed costs, professional leverage, ability to move, change, negotiate, or wait. This layer gives options. Layer 4, ownership, investments, business interests, productive assets, equity, systems, long-term capital. This layer begins to reduce pure dependence on labor. Many people try to jump from survival to ownership because ownership sounds exciting. But if stability is weak and mobility is low, ownership can become fragile. A market drop can scare you out. A business setback can ruin you. A cash emergency can force a bad sale. A debt burden can destroy patience. This does not mean you must wait forever. It means each layer must be respected. Survival without stability is constant stress. Stability without mobility can become stagnation. Mobility without ownership can become endless high-effort earning. Ownership without stability can become dangerous. The strong life integrates all 4, not perfectly, progressively. If you are in survival, the goal may be small stability. If you have stability, the goal may be mobility. If you have mobility, the goal may be ownership. If you have ownership, the goal may be resilience and purpose. That framework is more useful than comparing yourself to someone in a different layer. Someone investing heavily may have already built stability. Someone starting a business may have lower fixed costs or family support. Someone buying property may have a different income, country tax system, or safety net. Someone taking risk may have a buffer you do not see. Do not copy the move. Understand the position. A move that is intelligent for one position can be reckless for another. This is why financial advice must be filtered. Every piece of advice should pass through. What is my position? What is my time horizon? What is my risk capacity? What is my goal? What is my current fragility? What happens if this goes wrong? If you cannot answer those questions, slow down. Slowing down is not weakness. Sometimes it is protection. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing risk capacity with risk desire. Risk desire is how much risk you feel like taking. Risk capacity is how much risk your life can actually handle. A young person with no dependents, low fixed costs, stable income, and long-time horizon may have high risk capacity. A person with dependents, high debt, unstable income, and no emergency fund may have lower risk capacity, even if they desperately want high returns. Desperation can increase risk desire, while risk capacity is low. That is a dangerous combination, because the person needs a win so badly that they accept risks they cannot survive. This is how people chase scams, extreme speculation, leverage, or unrealistic promises. They are not always greedy. Sometimes they are exhausted. They want a way out, but a strategy that can destroy you is not a way out. It is a trap with better marketing. This is why boring foundations matter. They reduce desperation, and a less desperate person becomes harder to exploit. That alone is worth a lot. Now, let us talk about inflation again from the household perspective. When official institutions measure inflation, they use baskets, indexes, methodologies, weights, comparisons, and statistical systems. That is necessary. But your personal inflation may differ. If rents are rising fast where you live, your inflation may feel higher. If you spend a lot on food, food inflation matters more. If you commute by car, fuel matters. If you have children, childcare, education, clothing, and food matter. If you heat a home through winter, energy matters. If you need medical care, healthcare costs matter depending on the country. So official inflation is a map, but your spending is the terrain. Both matter. The map tells you the broader movement. Your budget tells you where it hurts. This is why tracking is not just about discipline. It is about diagnosis. If you know your personal cost drivers, you can respond better. Maybe food is the pressure, maybe rent, maybe transport, maybe debt, maybe subscriptions, maybe family support, maybe healthcare, maybe lifestyle, maybe taxes, maybe insurance, maybe childcare. Different pressure, different response. A person whose main problem is rent cannot solve everything by cutting small treats. A person whose main problem is emotional shopping must address triggers. A person whose main problem is debt must understand interest. A person whose main problem is low income must increase earning power. A person whose main problem is unstable income must build cash flow smoothing. Diagnosis again. No diagnosis, no strategy. Now, there is also a psychological side to inflation. When people feel prices rising, they may change behavior. They may buy earlier. They may stock up. They may demand higher wages. They may reduce discretionary spending. They may use credit. They may feel poorer, even before the numbers are fully clear. Expectations shape behavior. This is true in economics. It is also true inside a household. If you expect everything to become harder, you may become either more disciplined or more impulsive. Some people prepare, others spend now because they fear tomorrow will be worse. That second reaction is understandable but dangerous. Fear can say, buy now before it gets more expensive. Sometimes that may be rational. Other times, it is panic spending. Again, the difference is function. If buying now serves a clear planned need, maybe. If buying now is anxiety pretending to be planning, be careful. Inflation should make you more strategic, not more chaotic. It should push you to ask, which costs are rising? Can I increase income? Can I reduce waste? Can I lock in value intelligently? Can I avoid bad debt? Can I invest for the long term? Can I protect purchasing power? Can I build skills that keep income moving? What it should not do is push you into random fear-based spending or reckless investing. Fear is not a plan. Now, let us talk about another word, freedom. Financial freedom is overused. People attach it to beaches, laptops, luxury apartments, expensive watches, and passive income screenshots. But freedom may be much quieter. Freedom may be leaving a job that damages your health. Freedom may be taking care of a parent without financial panic. Freedom may be choosing a lower-paying but meaningful path because your fixed costs are low. Freedom may be taking 3 months to rebuild after burnout. Freedom may be not answering every message from a toxic client. Freedom may be saying no to a family demand without fear. Freedom may be not needing to impress anyone. Freedom may be buying back evenings. Freedom may be sleeping because one emergency will not destroy you. Freedom is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the absence of constant financial threat. That kind of freedom is worth respecting, and it begins before wealth. It begins with margin, then options, then ownership, then time. For some people, full financial independence may be possible. For others, the realistic goal may be financial resilience and improved agency. That still matters. Not every path needs to end in never working again. Some paths end in working differently, working with more choice, more protection, more leverage, less fear, less dependence. That is already meaningful. Because the goal is not laziness. The goal is not escaping all responsibility. The goal is having a life where responsibility does not become captivity. Because the goal is not laziness. The goal is not escaping all responsibility. The goal is having a life where responsibility does not become captivity. That distinction matters. A person can work and still be free in meaningful ways. Free because they are not drowning in debt. Free because they can leave a bad environment. Free because they have savings. Free because their skills are portable. Free because their lifestyle is not so inflated that every month becomes a threat. Free because they are building ownership slowly. Free because they are not using consumption to prove their worth. Free because they can make decisions from values, not panic. That is a very different life from someone who technically earns more but cannot move. And this is where many people misunderstand ambition. They think ambition means wanting more. More income, more status, more comfort, more possessions, more recognition, more visible success. But mature ambition is not just wanting more. It is wanting better structure, better options, better use of time, better resilience, better ability to choose, better alignment between money and values. More is not always better if more makes the structure heavier. A bigger house can be worse if it destroys mobility. A better car can be worse if it keeps you in debt. A higher-paying job can be worse if it consumes all health and time. A business can be worse if it creates chaos instead of leverage. An investment can be worse if it adds anxiety you cannot handle. A lifestyle can be worse if it forces you to betray your own future. So the question is not always, how do I get more? Sometimes the question is, what kind of more actually makes me freer? That question filters a lot. More income with no allocation may not make you freer. More income with clear allocation can. More possessions may not. More margin can. More credit may not. More liquidity can. More status may not. More optionality can. More busyness may not. More leverage can. More information may not. More applied wisdom can. This is why the word wealth should be handled carefully. Wealth is not only accumulation. It is the ability to sustain choice. If money increases but choice decreases, something is wrong. If income rises but fear rises too, something is wrong. If status rises but peace disappears, something is wrong. If your life looks better but feels more trapped, something is wrong. And that something is often structure. Now, let us talk about structure in a practical way. A financially stronger life usually has several components. Not perfect, not all at once, but progressively. First, visibility. You must know the numbers, not vaguely, not emotionally. Actually, income, essential expenses, fixed commitments, variable spending, debt balances, interest rates, minimum payments, savings, investments, emergency capacity, upcoming obligations, known risks. You cannot manage fog. And many people live in financial fog because fog protects emotion. If you do not look, you do not have to feel the full discomfort. But the price of not looking is that the problem manages itself. And financial problems that manage themselves usually get worse. Debt grows, subscriptions continue, spending patterns hide, interest accumulates, lifestyle becomes normal. Avoidance becomes habit. So the first step is not brilliance. It is visibility. Look, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Second, triage. Not everything can be fixed at once. A person must identify the biggest pressure. High interest debt, no emergency fund, income too low, housing too expensive, unstable cash flow, overspending, family obligations, risky investments, no skill growth, too much fixed lifestyle, different pressure, different priority. Financial advice becomes dangerous when it ignores triage. If your house is on fire, you do not start by repainting the walls. If high-interest debt is destroying you, chasing returns may be absurd. If income is too low, cutting small pleasures may not be enough. If you have no emergency fund, investing aggressively may create panic later. If your fixed costs are too high, a budget may show the problem but not solve it. Triage means asking, what is hurting me most right now? What creates the greatest fragility? What must be stabilized first? Third, rules. A person needs personal financial rules because emotion is inconsistent. Rules reduce the need to debate every decision. A rule can be simple. No new consumer debt unless there is a clear emergency and repayment plan. No lifestyle upgrade until a percentage of the raise is assigned. No investment in anything not understood. No financial decision above a certain amount without waiting 48 hours. No lending money that would create resentment if not repaid. No subscription that is not reviewed. No fixed cost added without asking what mobility it removes. The rules do not need to be perfect. They need to be clear enough to protect you from impulse. Fourth, buffers. Cash is not exciting, but buffers are what keep life from becoming panic. A buffer gives you time, and time improves decisions. A small buffer is better than none. A growing buffer is better than constant exposure. The purpose is not to maximize return. The purpose is to reduce desperation, because desperation is expensive. Desperation accepts bad terms. Desperation sells at bad prices. Desperation borrows too quickly. Desperation believes unrealistic promises. Desperation stays in bad environments. A buffer is not just money. It is emotional distance. Fifth, debt strategy. Debt must be named, not hidden, not minimized, not treated as normal background noise. What is the balance? What is the rate? What is the minimum payment? What is the real cost? What is the payoff plan? What behavior created it? How do you prevent the same pattern from rebuilding it? Paying debt without changing the behavior that created it is like draining water while leaving the tap open. You may make progress, then lose it. Debt strategy must include behavior strategy. Sixth, earning power. There is only so much cutting can do. At some point, income matters. How can you become more valuable, more visible, more skilled, more mobile, more connected, more able to solve expensive problems, more able to negotiate, more able to capture value? This does not always mean starting a business. Sometimes it means changing employer. Sometimes changing role. Sometimes adding a credential. Sometimes improving communication. Sometimes moving closer to sales or revenue. Sometimes learning a tool. Sometimes building a portfolio. Sometimes building reputation. Sometimes leaving a stagnant environment. Income expansion is not always immediate, but ignoring it can trap you inside austerity. Defense without expansion can become a small, fearful life. Expansion without defense can become chaotic and fragile. You need both. Seventh, investment framework. Once the foundation allows it, investing should not be approached as entertainment. It should be approached as allocation, goal, time horizon, risk tolerance, risk capacity, diversification, liquidity needs, costs, taxes, behavior, rebalancing, understanding. That may sound less exciting than, what should I buy? Good. Excitement is not the goal. Sustainability is. The best investment strategy is not the one that sounds smartest in a conversation. It is the one you can understand, fund, hold, and adjust responsibly through real life. Eighth, identity. This may be the hardest layer, because numbers can be changed faster than identity. If you identify as someone who must impress, money will serve performance. If you identify as someone who is always behind, money will serve comparison. If you identify as someone who cannot learn, money will remain mysterious. If you identify as someone who deserves relief every time life is hard, money will serve escape. If you identify as someone who is building options, your decisions slowly change. Identity is not magic. It is a behavioral anchor. What kind of person are you becoming with money? A reactor? A performer? A rescuer? A gambler? A hoarder? A builder? A learner? A strategist? A person can shift, but only if they stop defending the old identity. Now, let us address another uncomfortable issue: financial shame. Shame keeps people stuck. It says, you should already know this. You are too old. You made too many mistakes. You wasted too much. You are behind everyone. You are not smart enough for this. You do not belong in these conversations. Shame makes people avoid accounts, avoid debt statements, avoid conversations, avoid learning, avoid asking questions. And avoidance is expensive. Shame protects the ego from immediate pain, but exposes the future to larger pain. That is a terrible bargain. A better approach is sober responsibility, not shame. Responsibility says, this is mine to deal with. Shame says, this proves something bad about me. Responsibility can act. Shame freezes. Responsibility can learn. Shame hides. Responsibility can repair. Shame performs or collapses. So if your financial life is messy, the first thing is not to call yourself stupid. The first thing is to stop hiding. The numbers are not a moral verdict. They are coordinates. Coordinates tell you where you are, not who you are. And from coordinates, you can navigate. Without coordinates, you drift. Now, if you are deeply behind, this may hurt. But hurting and being hopeless are not the same. Pain can be information. Hopelessness is a conclusion. Do not jump too quickly from pain to hopelessness. If you have debt, there may be a plan. If you have no savings, there may be a first buffer. If you have low income, there may be a skill path. If you have emotional spending, there may be triggers to work with. If you have family pressure, there may be boundaries. If you have no investment knowledge, there may be education. If you have made mistakes, there may be repair. Not easy, but possible. Possible is enough to start. Now, let us look at the role of countries and systems again. In the United States, the financial system often pushes responsibility onto individuals in a very strong way. Retirement savings, healthcare decisions, student loans, credit scores, mortgage choices, investment accounts. A person may need significant financial literacy simply to avoid being damaged by complexity. In the United Kingdom, people may face different systems, but household budgets are still shaped by mortgage rates, rents, energy costs, pensions, taxes, and cost of living pressure. In the European Union, consumer protections, social systems, wages, housing markets, and inflation experiences vary widely by country, but the central issue remains. Households must translate policy and prices into daily decisions. In Australia, high household debt and housing affordability often shape financial strategy. The countries differ, but the individual challenge has a common thread. How do you build personal resilience inside systems you do not fully control? That is the central question, and the answer is not one thing. It is a stack: knowledge, income, liquidity, debt control, skills, ownership, boundaries, risk management, attention control, identity, community, good decisions repeated. That stack becomes your defense. Not perfect, but real. Now we should talk about community, because financial behavior is contagious. If everyone around you spends to signal, you will feel pressure. If everyone around you avoids money conversations, you will feel awkward being clear. If everyone around you treats debt as normal, you may stop questioning it. If everyone around you thinks investing is gambling, you may never learn. If everyone around you upgrades immediately, restraint may feel like failure. Your environment sets defaults, and defaults are powerful. If you want to change, you may need different inputs, different conversations, different channels, different books, different friends for certain topics, different role models, different standards. Not because you are better than others, because your current environment may be reinforcing the very patterns you are trying to break. This can be lonely at first. You may feel strange. You may feel too serious. You may feel boring. You may feel like you are missing out. But if the old normal was making you fragile, becoming strange is progress. There is a stage where financial growth feels like social discomfort. You say no. You stop upgrading. You talk differently. You ask questions others avoid. You read terms. You save when others spend. You invest when others mock it. You avoid hype when others chase it. You keep learning when others call it unnecessary. That discomfort is part of changing defaults. And over time, a new normal forms. What once felt restrictive starts feeling protective. What once felt boring starts feeling powerful. What once felt like sacrifice starts feeling like direction. That is when the identity begins to change. You are no longer just trying to control money. You are becoming someone who does not hand over the future so easily. That is a serious transformation. Now let us discuss the role of taxes, fees, and friction. Many people think only about gross income or headline returns. But real life happens after friction, after taxes, after fees, after inflation. After transaction costs, after interest, after maintenance, after insurance, after repairs, after currency effects, after time. This matters. A salary is not what you keep. A return is not what you keep. A property yield is not what you keep. A business sale is not what you keep. A side income is not what you keep. The real question is always net. Net money, net time, net energy, net risk. Net freedom. Some opportunities look good before friction, then mediocre after it. Some jobs pay more before considering commute, stress, taxes, hours, and health. Some investments look attractive before fees, taxes, liquidity limits, and risk. Some businesses look profitable before labor, refunds, marketing, accounting, and burnout. Some lifestyles look affordable before maintenance. This is why surface numbers deceive. A financially mature person looks beneath the headline, not to be negative, to be accurate. Accuracy protects you. Excitement can be useful, but accuracy must be in charge. Now, one of the biggest reasons people fall into bad financial decisions is because they confuse complexity with intelligence. A complicated strategy feels sophisticated. Many accounts, many assets, many trades, many theories, many opinions, many apps, many dashboards. But complexity can hide confusion. A simple strategy understood and followed may beat a complex strategy abandoned under stress. This is especially true for long-term investing. Simple does not mean stupid. Simple can mean robust, broad diversification, low cost, clear horizon, appropriate risk, consistent contributions, tax awareness, emergency liquidity, behavioral discipline. That may sound boring again, but boring works better than cleverness for many people. Cleverness is dangerous when it becomes ego. Ego wants to beat everyone. Ego wants to find the secret. Ego wants to predict. Ego wants to be early. Ego wants to be right. Ego wants to tell a story. But markets punish ego often. Personal finance punishes ego too. A person may buy too much house because ego wants status. Take too much debt because ego wants lifestyle. Concentrate investments because ego wants to feel brilliant. Refuse to budget because ego says tracking is for people with small lives. Avoid asking for help because ego fears looking ignorant. Ego is expensive. Humility is cheaper. Humility says, I do not know enough yet. I can learn. I should diversify. I should keep margin. I should read the terms. I should not bet the future on one idea. I should respect risk. I should not confuse income with wealth. I should not let appearances guide decisions. That humility may not sound heroic, but it builds survival. Now let us return to the emotional heart. Why does all of this matter? Because money is not just numbers. Money decides how much pressure enters ordinary moments. A birthday, a medical appointment, a broken appliance, a job change, a child's need, a parent's emergency, a move, a quiet Sunday night, a decision to rest, a decision to leave, a decision to try, a decision to wait. When money is chaotic, ordinary life becomes tense. When money is more structured, ordinary life gains space. That space is not everything, but it matters. A person with space can be more present, more patient, more creative, more honest, more generous without resentment, more willing to learn, more able to choose. So the point of financial structure is not to turn life into a spreadsheet. It is to make room for life outside the spreadsheet. That may be the most human reason to care, not to become obsessed with money, to stop money from occupying every emotional corner. Because when money is always urgent, it becomes the center even if you hate it. You think about it while driving, while eating, while trying to sleep, while working, while pretending to listen, while opening messages, while seeing prices, while declining invitations, while comparing yourself. That is not freedom from materialism. That is being dominated by money through scarcity. Understanding money can reduce that domination. Not eliminate it, but reduce it. Now, a serious warning. Financial improvement can become another form of self-punishment if you are not careful. You can become obsessed, track everything with anxiety, feel guilty for every pleasure, judge everyone, treat every expense as failure, turn investing into identity, turn saving into fear, turn productivity into a prison. That is not the goal. The goal is not to become rigid. The goal is to become directed. A directed life still has joy, still has generosity, still has beauty, still has rest, still has spontaneity. But it does not let every impulse become policy. It does not let every emotion become debt. It does not let every comparison become an upgrade. It does not let every increase become lifestyle. It does not let every fear become paralysis. Direction is different from rigidity. Rigidity says, no. Direction says, does this serve the life I am building? Sometimes the answer is yes. And when it is yes, enjoy it without guilt. Because guilt is not the goal. Coherence is. A coherent financial life is not necessarily the cheapest. It is the one where money serves what matters instead of constantly leaking into what does not. That is a better aim. Now let us begin pulling the strands together. If you were trained only to earn, your life will revolve around inflow. When is the next paycheck? How much is it? Will it cover the month? Can I get a raise? Can I work more? Can I survive? Those questions matter, but they are incomplete. If you learn to allocate, the questions deepen. What must this money become? What risk am I carrying? What debt is claiming my future? What expenses reduce mobility? What skills increase earning power? What assets can I build? What signals am I buying? What options am I creating? What pressures am I reducing? What freedom am I postponing? These questions change the game because they move you from receiver to designer. You may not control everything, but you design more than before, and that is enough to begin. Now, imagine the next paycheck, or the next invoice, or the next payment, or the next month of income. It arrives. The old pattern says, react, pay, spend, relieve, wait. The new pattern asks, before this disappears, what job does it have? That question may feel small, but it is not. Because repeated over time, it becomes a philosophy. Money for survival, yes. Money for protection. Money for reducing past mistakes. Money for skill. Money for future ownership. Money for meaningful joy. Money for generosity with boundaries. Money for options. Money for a life that is not entirely held hostage by the next inflow. That is allocation, not perfection. Allocation. And allocation is how earned income begins to become financial structure. Not all at once, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but slowly, the paycheck stops being only a rescue. It becomes material. Material for stability. Material for movement. Material for future choice. Material for repair. Material for growth. Material for a life that does not need to perform strength while quietly becoming weaker. That is the shift. From income as oxygen to income as material. When income is only oxygen, every month is survival. When income becomes material, some part of it can build. Maybe a very small part at first, maybe painfully small. But small is not meaningless if it is pointed in the right direction. A small buffer grows into breathing room. A small debt payment repeated becomes lower pressure. A small investment made with understanding becomes ownership. A small skill practiced consistently becomes earning power. A small refusal to upgrade becomes flexibility. A small boundary becomes protection. A small, honest conversation prevents resentment. A small change in attention reduces unnecessary desire. A small rule prevents a large mistake. Small things become large when time has enough repetitions to work with. That is one reason time matters so much. Time can punish neglect, but time can also reward structure. The difference is what you repeat. If you repeat debt, time amplifies debt. If you repeat avoidance, time amplifies confusion. If you repeat lifestyle inflation, time amplifies dependency. If you repeat learning, time amplifies capability. If you repeat saving, time amplifies buffer. If you repeat investing wisely, time may amplify ownership. If you repeat restraint, time amplifies freedom. The same force, different direction. This is why direction matters more than intensity. Intensity burns. Direction compounds. Many people have intense moments. A January plan, a crisis promise, a sudden budget, a weekend of motivation, a new app, a dramatic decision. But intensity without systems fades. Direction with systems survives ordinary days. And ordinary days are where most financial lives are built. Not in dramatic scenes. In what you do after a normal paycheck. In what you do after a normal temptation. In what you do after a normal stressful week. In what you do when nobody is watching. In what you repeat when it is boring. In what you protect when it would be easier to spend. In what you learn when it would be easier to scroll. In what you refuse when it would be easier to belong. That is where financial identity forms. Not in what you say you value. In what your repeated choices protect. Now let us be careful. This does not mean your financial life is only a reflection of character. That would be false. People face illness, care responsibilities, bad economies, weak labor markets, expensive housing, discrimination, family instability, unexpected crises, policy failures, inflation, layoffs, divorce, accidents, countries with different safety nets, systems that reward ownership more than labor. There are structural forces, real ones. A serious person does not deny them. But a serious person also does not use them to avoid every possible action. The question is not whether the system is fair. Often it is not. The question is, given the system, how do I become less fragile? That question is practical. It does not require pretending the world is fair. It requires refusing to be completely unarmed. Less fragile? That is the first serious target. Less fragile than last year. Less dependent than last year. Less reactive than last year. Less exposed to bad debt than last year. Less controlled by comparison than last year. Less ignorant of risk than last year. Less afraid to look at the numbers than last year. And then more. More liquidity. More skill. More options. More ownership. More patience. More clarity. More capacity to say no. More ability to act when something opens. This is how change becomes measurable without becoming fantasy. Now, let us talk about the most important kind of wealth that almost nobody can see. The ability to refuse. If you cannot refuse, you are not as free as you think. If you cannot refuse a loan because you have no buffer, the lender has power. If you cannot refuse a bad job because you have no savings, the employer has power. If you cannot refuse a family demand because guilt controls you, the family system has power. If you cannot refuse status spending because insecurity controls you, the audience has power. If you cannot refuse panic because you do not understand your investments, the market has power. If you cannot refuse consumption because every emotion becomes a purchase, your impulses have power. Money is not the only source of power, but it often determines how much power other things have over you. That is why a financial buffer is more than a bank balance. It is a small rebellion against desperation. Debt freedom is more than a number. It is a refusal to keep paying for past impulses. Skill is more than education. It is a refusal to be priced only by yesterday's capacity. Investing is more than return. It is a refusal to let every unit of labor die in consumption. Lower fixed costs are more than frugality. They are a refusal to make your life unnecessarily heavy. Boundaries are more than discipline. They are a refusal to let other people allocate your future without consent. This is the deeper layer. Money is practical, but it is also political inside your own life. It decides who has leverage, you or the pressures around you. Now think of a household where every dollar, pound, euro, or peso is already claimed. The income arrives and immediately belongs to bills, debt, rent, subscriptions, payments, and past decisions. That household may be functioning, but it is not directing. Now think of another household, not rich, not luxurious, but with some margin. Some cash, lower bad debt, clearer spending, a plan for skill, a modest investment habit, fixed costs under control, fewer status obligations, honest conversations. This household may not impress anyone, but it has more agency. Agency is the point, the ability to act, not perfectly, not without constraints, but more than before. That is why the appearance of wealth can be so misleading. A high-consumption household can have low agency. A modest household can have rising agency. From outside, people may misread both. But inside, the difference is enormous. One lives under constant requirement. The other is building room, and room is where life begins to open. Now there is a final trap to discuss. The trap of turning financial clarity into endless preparation. Some people study and study. They watch every video, read every article, compare every strategy, delay every action. They want certainty, perfect timing, perfect knowledge, perfect confidence. But certainty does not arrive. At some point, responsible action must begin. Not reckless action, not blind action, but action. If you need a budget, make one. If you need to see debt, open the statements. If you need a buffer, start small. If you need to reduce fixed costs, choose one. If you need to learn investing, begin with education from serious sources. If you need to improve income, pick one skill or one career move. If you need a boundary, have the conversation. If you need to stop performing, stop one performance. Financial maturity is not only thinking better, it is behaving differently. And behavior requires contact with reality. You will make mistakes. You will adjust. You will learn. You will feel discomfort. That is normal. A person waiting to be perfect before beginning is still avoiding. Avoidance can dress itself as research. Be careful. There is a point where another video is not preparation. It is delay. There is a point where another spreadsheet is not clarity. It is fear. There is a point where another plan is not strategy. It is avoidance of the first step. So yes, learn, but make learning answerable to action. Otherwise, information becomes another form of consumption. Financial content can become entertainment. You feel productive because you are listening, but nothing changes. That is a subtle trap. The goal is not to listen forever. The goal is to change the structure of your life, even a little. Now, as this comes together, the central message becomes clearer. The modern economy does not require you to be financially stupid. It only requires you to stay financially reactive. Reactive to prices, reactive to debt, reactive to lifestyle, reactive to fear, reactive to comparison, reactive to opportunity, reactive to urgency, reactive to every new desire. Reactive people are easy to move. They can be sold to, lent to, influenced, underpaid, overcharged, distracted, pressured, exhausted. A reactive financial life is not necessarily poor. It can have income, it can have status, it can have consumption, but it lacks command. Command is different. Command says, I know what this money is for. I know what this debt costs. I know what this purchase sacrifices. I know what this investment requires. I know what this lifestyle does to my mobility. I know what this job gives me and what it takes. I know what I am building. I know what I am no longer willing to finance. That kind of command is not arrogance. It is adulthood. And adulthood with money is not glamorous. It is often quiet. It is saying no, waiting, reading, asking, learning, separating, reducing, building, repeating. It does not always feel powerful in the moment, but over time, it changes posture. You stop approaching money like a frightened receiver. You start approaching it like an allocator, a builder, a person trying to make every unit of effort serve more than the next bill. Now, if this sounds far from where you are, start smaller. Do not turn the distance into shame. Ask one question. What is the next decision that makes me less fragile? Not rich, less fragile? Maybe it is opening the accounts. Maybe it is listing debts. Maybe it is stopping one subscription. Maybe it is setting a tiny automatic transfer. Maybe it is learning the difference between a high-yield savings account, a bond, an index fund, and a speculative asset. Maybe it is calling the lender. Maybe it is increasing income. Maybe it is refusing a purchase. Maybe it is negotiating a bill. Maybe it is tracking food costs. Maybe it is building a skill. Maybe it is telling someone, I cannot keep doing this financially. Maybe it is waiting 48 hours before a large purchase. Maybe it is admitting that your lifestyle has become too heavy, small, real, directional. That is enough for a beginning. A beginning does not need to impress anyone. It only needs to be honest, because the opposite of financial chaos is not immediate wealth. The opposite of chaos is order. And order can begin quietly. A list, a rule, a boundary, a transfer, a payment, a conversation, a decision, a plan, then repetition. And over time, order creates margin. Margin creates options. Options create agency. Agency creates a different life. Not always a rich life, not always an easy life, but a less trapped one. And for many people, that would already be revolutionary. Now, let us close where we started. Most people were trained to earn. They were trained to produce income, receive it, spend it, stretch it, worry about it, and wait for the next cycle. But earning alone is not enough. Earning is the door. Allocation is the architecture. Without allocation, income leaks into whatever is loudest. With allocation, income begins to take form. Protection, mobility, ownership. Time, health, skill, choice, peace, future. The money may be the same amount at first, but the relationship changes. And when the relationship changes, the life can start changing too. Not overnight, not magically, not without setbacks, but directionally. The next time money enters your life, do not only ask, how much is it? Ask, what is this supposed to become? If the answer is only gone, then the old cycle continues. But if even a small part becomes protection, skill, debt freedom, ownership, time, or a real option, then something has shifted. Maybe no one sees it. Maybe nothing looks different from the outside. Maybe the number is still modest. But underneath, the architecture has begun to change. And that is how a person stops being merely an earner. Not by hating work, not by worshiping money, not by chasing every promise, but by learning to direct what passes through their hands before the world directs it for them. Because money you do not understand will still organize your life. It will organize it through bills, debt, fear, status, urgency, comparison, avoidance, and other people's incentives. But money you understand, even imperfectly, can begin to serve. It can defend, it can wait, it can build, it can buy time, it can reduce fear, it can open doors, it can turn effort into something that remains. That is the real shift, from earning to allocating, from reacting to designing, from signals to options, from lifestyle to position, from pressure to agency. And maybe that is the first real definition of financial maturity. Not having all the money you want, but making the money you do have stop working against the life you say you want. That is where the work begins. Not in the fantasy of a perfect future. In the next decision, the next paycheck, the next purchase, the next debt payment, the next hour of learning, the next boundary, the next moment where you choose structure over performance. And if this kind of thinking speaks to you, then this was not just a video about money. It was a doorway into a different way of looking at work, time, pressure, status, and freedom. Because once you understand that money is not only something you earn, but something you assign, the question changes forever. You stop asking only, how do I get more? And you start asking, What am I building with what already passes through my life? That question is not loud, but it is serious. And if you keep asking it long enough, it can change the way you move through the entire system.